Wednesday, May the 20th. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of That's What G Said podcast. I'm going to be bouncing around today between recap of The Last Dance, the Bulls documentary. We'll go through a recap of the final two parts of that 10-part series that aired over the weekend. We'll hit up the NFL with Erik. We're going to go through part 2 of our 3-part series where we broke down every team in the NFL based on their schedules, over, under, win totals, their tough stretches, fantasy players we like. We get through each team. So we start with Dallas, and actually we ended with Dallas last time. We go from Denver through Miami. So we go from the Broncos through the Dolphins, and then we'll pick up with part 3, and that's going to begin in just a few days, and that starts with Minnesota, with the Vikes. So Denver through Miami. We're going to go through some horse racing for Thursday. Best plays from Gulfstream, a pick 5 and some plays throughout at Churchill, pick 5 and some plays throughout at Golden Gate, and then a recap of Wrestlemania 5 with Jason Beem, Danny Kovoloff. We go through every match, the promos, the commentary, everything. When the Mega Powers explode back in 1989, Macho Man versus Hulk Hogan in the main event, the Ultimate Warrior versus Rick Rude for the IC title. Fun show to discuss. Let's get right into The Last Dance. So I'm bummed that this was parts 9 and 10. I really enjoyed this series. I know a lot of people out there were complaining because it's very pro Michael Jordan, and he got a lot of editing approval, and that's why this thing was made, because Jordan was involved. But it's interesting. I like hearing him talk. I like to hear from him. And you kind of take it with a grain of salt, and you understand that everything you're seeing and hearing is probably not 100% accurate, right? I mean, it is what documentary or behind the scenes look is, right? There's always some kind of an angle, and this was a lot of fun. So part 9 begins with the Pacers Bulls. And this is 98, and Reggie and MJ are getting into it. And Reggie's talking about how he didn't fear MJ as much as everybody else. He said what happened, he tells a funny story about when he was young, he talked trash to Michael. They were playing, and he had a really good first half. And then MJ just turned it on and absolutely destroyed him in the second half. And then Michael told Reggie, don't ever talk trash to Black Jesus. MJ felt that the Pacers actually played them the toughest this season, and they were in the 98 Eastern Conference Finals. Bulls go up 2-0. Pacers win Game 3 behind Reggie, and Game 4 is a back and forth. Bulls go up 1 with 6.4 seconds left. Pacers turn it over, have to foul. Pippen misses both free throws. Pacers ball with 2.9 seconds left. Reggie pushes off MJ, and he hits that game winner to go up. Bulls ball with 0.7 seconds left. MJ has the double clutch shot. He just misses. He has the opportunity to actually make it 3-1, but it's tied 2-2. And then we flash back to 97. So it's the 97 finals with Utah when Stockton hits the game winner to beat the Rockets in the Western Conference Finals to send Utah to the finals. So it's Utah versus the Bulls, and MJ's got a little chip on his shoulder because Karl Malone got the MVP. That was added motivation for him. Game 1, tied, 7 seconds left. Brian Russell guarding MJ said he had talked smack to MJ one time as a rookie, and Michael had him circled, and he ends up hitting the game winner. So the Bulls go up 2-0. Jazz win Game 3. Bulls in Game 4. Bulls are up 1 with a minute left. You get a great pass by Stockton to get up by 1. Jazz tie it up 2-2. Before Game 5, remember the flu game? Michael's hungry at around 10 o'clock at night. There's nothing but pizza open. So he gets delivered to the hotel. A bunch of guys show up with the delivery. At 2:30 a.m., he's puking. He's in bed all day. He's got the IV going before the game. And then after that slow start, he gets going. Game's tied at 85 with 40 seconds left. He misses a free throw, but he gets the rebound. It's the Bulls' ball. Then he hits a 3 with 25 seconds left. The Bulls win. They go up 3-2. Then we start to get a little bit about Steve Kerr, which is kind of cool. We hear about how he would look and understand his role. He kind of would model himself after John Paxson. He wanted to be that super role player. And we get story on Kerr and his family, playing basketball in the driveway. Steve's dad was a professor at UCLA, and that's kind of what being around UCLA, of course, with their basketball tradition, really got Steve into basketball. And Steve ended up getting a late scholarship to Arizona. His dad became the president of the American University of Beirut. His family joined him there, and in a really sad story, his dad ends up getting shot. And he talks a little bit about that. So we now get Kerr's moment. It's Game 6. He'd been struggling. They're up 3 with 2 minutes left. The Jazz hit a 3 to tie it with 28 seconds left. Kerr hits a shot to go up 2, and the Bulls win. This is his big moment. He actually has a funny speech at the rally, the celebration championship rally, and he talks about how they're in the huddle, and Michael says he couldn't handle the moment, and Phil says, "You know what? Let's send one to Steve." And it's really genuine, heartfelt stuff to see. The role players, the ones who got beat up at practice all the time with Michael, that were there through the battles, get their moments. And that's what one of the things I also really liked about this all the way through. You get the little look at anytime somebody stepped up and hit a big shot, and this time it's Kerr. Now we're back to the 98 Eastern Conference Finals against the Pacers, and it's the era on the line. It is Game 7. MJ guaranteed the Game 7 win. We get a look into MJ's security guys, his crew that he loved. It was like a group of older guys that he kept around him, I think a little bit to keep him in line. He was kind of missing the father figure after his dad had passed away. One of those guys is Gus that we talk about, who really protected Michael. He was the head of his security. And Michael was very influential in helping Gus when he was sick. He was around him a lot. He actually helped him. His wife, Gus's wife, said that because of Michael, he actually ended up going and getting checked and finding out that he had cancer, because he could tell something was wrong. So it's Game 7. Pacers are up 12 early, and they're tied at 28 midway through the 2. Back and forth game, tied at 69 early in the fourth quarter. Pacers up 2 with 7 minutes left. Pacers up 3 with 6:39 left. And this is where they said they started to feel like they got a little confidence. They thought they were going to win this thing. They thought the Bulls were done. There's a jump ball, and Kerr ends up hitting a 3. And then the crowd really gets into it. Instead of being tense, if you've seen these Game 7s a lot of times, the crowds are tense, especially at home. They don't know which way to go. And then once you start to get later in the game, I think that you kind of get lost in the game, and you kind of forget that, oh my, the magnitude of the Game 7. And it felt like this is what happened. This might have been one of those moments that shifted, and instead of being really tense and kind of nervous crowd, they really started to get into it. And that's one thing that the Pacers players were saying. They could feel it. And the Bulls end up winning, and they're off to the 98 finals against Utah. A Utah Jazz team that is rested. They have home court. The Bulls are coming off a Game 7. This is the end of their three-peat, all the emotional weight of the last dance, the final season. The Jazz want their revenge because they got beat by this Bulls team in 97. And the Jazz beat the Bulls both times in the regular season in that 97-98 year. So it's Game 1. The Bulls are down 2 with 23 seconds left. Longley ties it. They go to overtime, but the Jazz win Game 1 in overtime. So the Bulls are drained. They're exhausted. They end up winning Game 2 by 5. I mean, this is a good Utah team that rolled through the playoffs this year. They swept the Lakers with Shaq. Somebody mentions that to MJ. He doesn't care. He downplays Shaq. The Bulls win Game 3. They beat the Jazz 96-54. A massive, massive beatdown. And then the next day, where's Dennis Rodman? Nobody knows. You know where he is? WCW Nitro. He's in the NWO with Hulk Hogan. I remember when Rodzilla used to show up on my TV all the time. He's using a chair against Diamond Dallas Page. He's dropping elbows in the ring. But he shows back up, and the Bulls win Game 4. Now they're up 3-1. Jazz win Game 5 at Chicago. It's 3-2. And they go back to Utah for the final 2 games. Pippen has his back stiffness. He's immediately hurting. He goes to the locker room early. And so now, there's some things throughout the series that don't make Pippen look all that great. You got the migraine, the game he sat out late, the game he wouldn't go in. Now this back injury. But he continues to try to play through it. The Jazz are up 4 at the half in game 6. And Pippen comes back for the second half. Rodman and Malone get into it early in the second half. And they're basically just using Pippen as a decoy. I mean, he can't move. MJ's exhausted. He's short on a ton of his jumpers. Pippen keeps coming in for a few minutes, and then he'll go stretch, and he'll be on the bike, and he's working with massage therapists, and then he'll come back in the game like 5-minute spurts. And somehow he's able to make some big plays down the stretch. The Bulls are up by 1 with 6 minutes and 40 seconds left. The Jazz all of a sudden are back up by 3. Pippen hits a little turnaround. The Bulls are down by 1 with 4 minutes and 50 seconds left in this game 6. And then the Bulls are down 3 with 41 seconds left. And Bob Costas calls what happens next one of the greatest sequences you'll ever see in any sport. Costas is someone who's called every major sporting event. This is not hyperbole. So you get a Michael Jordan layup. All of a sudden the Bulls are down by 1 with 37 seconds left. Michael strips the ball and steals it. And then he has the little crossover push-off. He hits that jumper at the top of the key, the little push-off where he pushes from behind. 5.2 seconds left. Bulls up 1. The Jazz call a timeout. Stockton misses. Bulls win in 6 for their second three-peat. In the after-party, it's Leo! Leonardo DiCaprio's hanging out with them afterwards. And the media keep asking about next year. Of course, they're not worried about it. They're not going to talk about it because I think most of them all know they were done. There was no chance of this coming back again. They had been talking about The Last Dance all year. I mean, maybe you figured if they did really win, how could you break them up and not give them another shot? That's exactly what happened. So Karl Malone, they actually show the footage. He comes onto the team bus to congratulate them. We get a Carmen Electra party in. MJ's playing the piano. And then at the Bulls rally, Phil gives credit to Jerry Krause in kind of like a backhanded way. And in current times, Pippen calls Krause the best GM. He's one of the more troubled figures in this because he and when we talked with Mike Joyce about it too, he, I think, deserves all of the credit, yet at the same time all of the blame. He put it all together, but he still was the reason why they couldn't take another shot at this. And who knows? Like, there's a really good article in The Ringer that I was just reading that talked about how a lot of the players moving forward weren't very good, and then it was what a disaster the Bulls were themselves the next year when they tried to rebuild one of the all-time worst, like, inept offenses. But he did put this team together and make some really good moves, a couple real key moves in order to get the guys around Michael that he needed to succeed. Ryan's, actually before that we see David Stern talking about the NBA growth through MJ. Obama talks about Michael's impact, as even more than on the basketball court. And then Reinsdorf asks Phil to come back, but Phil says he wants to leave. He didn't want to coach a rebuild. He didn't think it was fair to Krause, who wanted to go in that direction. The Bulls weren't going to be able to bring everyone back on their higher market value. But MJ, he talks about this really for one of the first times, and he was kind of pissed. He wanted to come back again. He said they would have all come back on one-year deals trying to win a 7th. He said he still can't accept not being able to try for 7. And then there's Steve Kerr tells a little story about how after the win, everybody was asked to write something down about what the season meant to them, and Michael wrote a poem, and everyone had something emotional to say. They ended up burning everything, and And they got to see a side of Michael they hadn't really seen. And, I mean, that's it. MJ retires. Pippen, Rodman, Kerr, Phil, all gone. Bulls are a completely different team next year with a bunch of names of guys that you've never heard of. But this was great because Michael is not someone who we get to hear this side of from a lot. So whether some of the stories were BS and maybe some that made him look better or that were, tilted against people that he didn't necessarily like as much, this was fun. I really enjoyed this, and if you didn't get the chance to watch, you can go do so, on ESPN, watch ESPN. They have all the series, of the 10-part series, and look forward to the next really good sports documentary type thing that comes out that we can discuss with you here on That's What G Said. Let's move from basketball into football. Let's go to part 2 of our NFL team-by-team schedule breakdown with Erik. We're going to go from Denver through Miami, team-by-team schedules, over-under total, some fantasy discussion. Listen in, NFL fans. You're going to really enjoy this one. On Dallas this year as we move to Denver. This is a team a lot of people are high on. Their over-under is 7.5. They lost a lot of really close games last year. They have a ton more weapons, and it seems like they're going to go kind of all in and give the young quarterback an opportunity here to take the ball and run with it. They kick things off with some definitely question mark games, right? I mean, home against the Titans, that's an either-or game for sure. They play the Steelers on the road, who I don't think I'm quite as high on as other teams. The Steelers aren't bad, but you don't know what you're going to be getting there with Ben early in the season. Then they come home and play the Bucs. I think that's a great spot to probably play Denver. And then you get, at the Jets and at the Patriots, but those aren't monsters. I don't know about the Patriots this year. We're going to talk about them in a minute. They come home against the Dolphins. Like, there are winnable games here. And then the second half, you see the Raiders a couple times. You see the Chargers a couple times. You have the Panthers on there. Obviously, the 2 Chiefs games are going to be tough for them. Where do you stand with this Denver team?
I love this Denver team. Like, I played them plus 140 to make the playoffs, 10-1 to win the West. And I figure if they win the West, Vic Fangio is going to win Coach of the Year, so I saw him at 28-1 to be Coach of the Year, so I put a small play on that. They start off on Monday Night Football with the Titans. I think the Titans are the most overvalued team in the league right now. That line's at 2. I'll definitely be invested in that. That Steelers game, like, you're right. I don't know if Big Ben's going to be in shape or not. Like, how long, if there's no training camp, is it going to take for him to get going? So that could go either way. Brady has been historically average in Mile High. He hasn't really been that good, so that's definitely a spot where I'm going to look to take the Broncos. But then they have to travel from the West Coast to play the Jets on a short week in the East Coast. So, I mean, that's definitely a play for the Jets. As much as I hate the Jets and Sam Darnold, I'm definitely going to, unfortunately, have to bet them there. And then even the Dolphins, when the Dolphins come there on week 6, because they have the Chiefs week 7 before the bye, and
so you're looking ahead.
Chiefs in like 2015. I mean, if they're like, hypothetically, if they are like, I don't know, like 5-1 going into that Dolphins game, 4-2, something like that, I'll definitely have a play on the Dolphins. But I mean, if they're like 1-4 or what, like 2-4,
it doesn't serve the same.
Yeah. And then right after the bye, I mean, those are 2 tough games on the road at the Falcons and at Vegas. And then the Chargers are going to be tough. Saints, but at least with the Saints, it's at home. So Breeze outdoors. And then Sunday Night Football. And then at least to end, they have 2 out of 3 at home, which helps them a lot. And they have the Panthers on the road, which I think they should be able to win there. I think their schedule lines up where they get a couple teams in some good situations where they're going to be in a good position. And they have Pat Shurmur, who's going to put Drew Lock in a situation to succeed. I mean, they're putting all the weapons around him. Their offensive line improved. They got a speed slot receiver, possession wide receiver in Judy, 2 tight ends that are fast that can beat linebackers, and a bell cow back in Gordon, and a change in pace back in Phillip Lindsay. I mean, they're putting Lock in a position to win, so it's all on him. If he can come in and just improve, they're for sure a playoff team.
I think they're a 9 or 10 win team.
Yeah.
I do. I think when I look at them, and I think they have a good opportunity to get into the playoffs and have an opportunity to battle for the division. As we move on to your team, the Detroit Lions, their over/under is 6.5 here, and I think very similar to what we said with the Bears. Man, this week 1 game is gonna. It feels like it's gonna really set the tone for their season because their weeks 1 through 4 are not easy, but there are spots throughout the rest of the season where you look and you see some super winnable stretches, Redskins at Panthers, home against the Texans. You could get a couple wins right there. You go at the Jags and at the Falcons, and then you have the Colts, but you have the Colts at home. Those are 3 games where you wouldn't be surprised to see either result happen, in those games. What do you think of this Lions team and their 4-game stretch to start and that big week 1 game?
Well, I mean, I basically figured, that game's a pick 'em right now. On all my books against the Bears. And you're right, that's going to kind of set the tone for the season. But their next 2 games, they're at Green Bay. They always play Green Bay tough. And I know that's Green Bay's home opener, but that's a game where Green Bay has sandwiched in between at Minnesota and at New Orleans. So that's kind of a good spot to play for the Lions when they're playing Green Bay, and then they have a revenge factor against the Cardinals after they blew that. I think they could be 3-1 or 4-0. Maybe I'm just being optimistic going into that week 5 bye, which is insanely early. But on the flip side, it wouldn't surprise me if they're 0-4 if they lose the Bears game. So, It just all hinges on that Bears game.
You get a little confidence with that win at home, and then you're up for the Packers game to try to steal that one. And then you mentioned you got the built-in revenge factor. And then all of a sudden you're riding high. You come back, you play a Saints team at home where you've got your bye that you're looking at. So, I'm with you. This is a difficult team. I think I'd still lean over in their total on the win total on the season at 6.5 because I think the Vikings are going to be okay, but they're not going to be they could lose all 6 division games, or they could go 4-2 in the division very easily. I don't think anybody in their division is so good that they can't beat them or even beat them twice. But they're not. None of the teams are gimmies. So what's going to happen with them in those crucial divisional games? Because the Packers, they'll probably not be quite as good as they were last year, but they'll still be a good team. The Bears will be competitive, and then you got the Vikings. They're going to be solid, but none of those teams feel like they're going to be any of the best teams in the league. So it's not a bad division. It's a competitive division, but nobody really scares the hell out of you.
Exactly. I played them at plus 275 to make the playoffs and plus 705 to win it just because every other team has so many questions. The Bears have offensive line questions, the quarterback questions. The Vikings with Zimmer, it's every other year. He has O-line issues. They lost their whole secondary, and they lost one of their pass rushers. So, there's so many questions, and you're getting value. When Stafford played, the offense looked good. And this is going to be the second year. And I just think there's just value there. And 3 out of the 4 games to end the season are at home. They have Green Bay week 14. And who knows, if stuff hits the fan in Green Bay, that could be Jordan Love time. And then
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And then they're at the Titans. They have Brady coming in. And then they have Minnesota in week 17. Their schedule from week 10 to finish is doable. If they can just survive the first 4 and go 3-1 or 2-2, they're in a great position to make the playoffs.
They have only 3 road games in that stretch. They're at the Panthers, at the Bears, and at the Titans.
Yeah.
The Bears is probably the scariest one of those 3, but it's not, again, they have what's difficult about their schedule, I think, is that you have the Jags on there and maybe the Redskins and maybe the Panthers that you circle as wins. The rest of their games aren't necessarily going to be easy, but you don't have Ravens, you don't have Chiefs, you don't have some of those teams that you automatically look at or Saints on the road and say that's an L.
And West Coast trip. They're pretty much in the Eastern or Central time zone. So, they're not traveling that much. If they can make it to week 10 and be competitive, I think they can make a run.
We get to one of their divisional rivals in the Green Bay Packers. Their over/under is 9, and they've got big divisional games for everyone in this division right off the bat, where they start the season at the Vikings, and then they play the Lions. Come home and play the Lions, and that's the game that's a trap game, as you mentioned, because They go at Vikings, they come home against the Lions, and they go at the Saints in their first 3 weeks. So they're going to be looking at that Saints game on the road, which is what is that, the Sunday Night Football game. They're going to be looking at the at Vikings game to start the season, and they might look at the Lions game coming home and think that that's going to be kind of a walkover, an easy game. That's a game where I probably play the Lions, playing at Green Bay. Later in their season, they've got a trip where they have to go to Tampa, and then they have to play the Texans next week. So they play the Bucs and the Texans on the road back to back, and that's amidst a pretty tough stretch of 4 where they have at Tampa, at Texans, home for the Vikings, and then at the 49ers. So that's not an easy little stretch there coming off their bye.
I mean, I look at this, and they play Minnesota twice in the first 8 weeks. I mean, if they lose both of those games, they're out of it.
They're done.
I mean, they could legitimately be out of contention by week 8, and then they go to play San Francisco, travel out west in a short week. I mean, this is just a brutal part. And I mean, I know I'm going to be on the Falcons because there's the back-to-back primetime games. So week 4, I got circled. Week 2, I got circled. I mean, I even have week 10 circled because that's in between the 49ers and the Colts,
which looks
Colts
like an
game.
L on paper. I like the Colts a lot this year. Yeah.
I mean, like, their schedule, they didn't get any favors. And then once stuff starts hitting the fan there, if it does, I mean, everyone's going to, when is Love going to play? There's probably going to be dissension. I mean, there's just so many questions with them. The only future I did play with them is I found Devontae Adams plus 1,600 to lead the league in receiving yards. The Packers have 132 abandoned targets. And Rodgers only throws to people he trusts, and who else is there? So I just think he's going to be peppering.
Force-feeding it. Yep.
I mean, I actually ranked him number 1 in my rankings for fantasy wide receivers this year, just because I figure he's just going to get pumped with targets. And then it wouldn't surprise me this year if they're like 5-10 going into that Week 17 game, and Jordan Love plays.
I think I'm going under with them. I was a lot higher on them last year. Their schedule just was much better last year. It felt like when you looked at it on paper, it did them a lot more favors than this year. As we move,
they could be 0-4. Yeah. They could be 0-4 at their bye, and then have to travel to Tampa Bay.
And I just don't love the whole vibe of the team with their draft where it felt like they swing and missed. Last year was the year where they did a whole lot of stuff on the offseason. They really improved their defense, which, I understand you do a whole lot last year. You don't have to do as much this year, but it felt like they did absolutely nothing, which never is what you want to do. You always want to be feeling like you're at least making some moves and improving a little bit.
And then even that Week 7 spot, because they're going to be at the Texans in between the Bucs and the Vikings and the 49ers right after the Vikings. I mean, that's a perfect spot to play the Texans in that spot.
Not an easy stretch there coming right off the bye for the Green Bay Packers. I'm under the 9 on them as we move to the Houston Texans. They're going to kick off the NFL season. They're going to be the first game of the year. They're going to play on the road against the Chiefs. A rematch of that playoff game last year. Their over-under for season win totals is 8. And, I mean, they've got a really difficult 4 games to start the season. I mean, you're talking about a team that could very easily be 0-4, but there are some spots that you might play them. They might not be a bad play in week 2 when they come home against the Ravens, with, like you mentioned, with the 10 days off in between after opening the season on Thursday. But then they got to go at Pittsburgh. Then they come home and they play the Vikings. Then after that, they get the Jags at home, which is a very winnable game. But then they have 2 games that are definite either-or games. I mean, you go at the Titans and you have the Packers coming. That game could go either way. The over-under of 8 feels about right. The second half after their bye, they've got a game where they got to go on the road and play the Browns. They got 2, their 2 games against the Colts there. I'm kind of indifferent on them. I don't love them. I just don't think the division is very strong. So I still think they're probably the second best team in their division, so they could maybe stack up 3 or 4 other wins against. But I like the Colts more than I like the Texans this year.
I mean, I think their ceiling for wins is 8. If they can somehow be 1-3 after the first 4 games, I would consider that a victory.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't surprise me if they were 1-7 or 2-6.
6 or
1-6,
maybe 2-5 or yeah.
Going
into
the bye. My fault. And then,
no problem.
But then they have the 2 2 road games, and traveling on the road is never easy, especially like Jacksonville knows that offense. So, I mean, that's going to be a tough
And it's a divisional game. It's a divisional game too, you know?
And then right after the bye, they have 3 out of 4 on the road, and the game against Detroit, that's the Thanksgiving Day game. So the Lions are always up for that. Then they play the Colts, at Bears, at Colts, Bengals, and Titans. I mean, there's just never like a stretch of a couple weeks when they can kind of like, you know what I mean? With every team, there's usually like a 2 or 3 week stretch where you can kind of take a deep breath. I kind of feel with the Texans, you don't get that at all. You maybe get a game like game 5 against the Jags. You get that breather then, but then boom, you're on the road at Tennessee. I mean, they just never really have that break. You know what I mean? Like, and then that stretch where it's Colts at Bears at Colts. I'm definitely going to be on the Bears on week 14, and I'm going to be on the Bengals on week 16
when they come home after those 2 road games. Yeah,
because it's sandwiched in between the Titans, and if this division is tight like everyone says it could be, I mean, that could be a look-ahead spot. Or, I mean, Bill O'Brien could be done, and they're playing for next year. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't think O'Brien makes it out of the season, to be honest.
I'm with you. I don't think – I would go under even their 8. To me, that feels like kind of like their ceiling. I just don't see them as a team that can get to 10 wins with the schedule. So that to me, they're probably like a 6-7 win team this year. We get to the Colts. Their over-under is 9. And, I mean, I like the Colts a lot. I think they got a great start to the season. They got to go on the road and play Jacksonville. Yes, it's a divisional game, but, you know, not a tough game on the road. You come home and you play the Vikings and the Jets. Those are super winnable games before you have 2 road games where you go play the Bears and the Browns. But again, like, they could very easily be, you know, 6 or 7-0. That would not shock me at all. There's a couple tough road games in there where, you know, the Bears, the Browns, they could lose. They could, you know, the Vikings at home. That's not, you know, a game that's necessarily just a walkover, but they do not have the most difficult start to the season here.
Oh, no, I love this team, too. Like, right after they traded for Buckner, I actually got them at over 8.5.
Nice.
And 26-1 to win it all. I mean, I think what they're doing with the defensive end is great. They have a great start to the season where they do get Jacksonville at home. And then they get the Vikings, which is going to be tough, but it's at home, Jets at home, then the 2 games on the road, and then the Bengals. I mean, they could easily sweep that. They could be 6-0 or 5-1
before the bye. Yeah.
I mean, but definitely that week 8 game coming off the bye, going to Detroit right before they play the Ravens, that's going to be a bet against spot for them. I'm definitely going to be on the Lions there just because
especially if they're 5-1 or 6-0, like we said, that's definitely a big play against spot for them because they're going to be kind of flying high. They're coming off their bye. They got the Ravens the next week at home, and they got like a stretch of like Ravens, Titans, Packers, Titans, Texans, which are kind of tough teams, playoff teams from last year. So that Lions game could absolutely be a game that they're looking at saying, you know, this, you know, kind of a gimme game or a game that they're not really focusing in on looking ahead.
I mean, because they do that, and then I feel the Ravens game, I feel that's a preview of the AFC Championship. And then they have to travel to Tennessee on the short week. So, I mean, that 3-game stretch, even with the Packers 4-game, like, that's tough. And then they get the 2 back-to-back games on the road, and going back-to-back on the road is always tough in the NFL, at Texans and at Vegas, and then Texans at Steelers, but at least they end with the Jaguars. I mean, they could start out 6-0, but then they have to make sure they come out on point on week 8. But I really like this team. They kept the O-line intact. I love the fact how they drafted Taylor. I think he's going to be the bell cow back by the time the season's over. Max, obviously, on his way out. Hines, who's an established third down back because Rivers likes to check down. Hilton's going to move in and play the slot now.
Hitman now. Yep.
I mean, they definitely – I'm super high on this team. I mean –
Me too.
I think they're going to do really well.
I do too. They're an over. I'll play. There will be a team that I'll be watching week to week. There's going to be the best offensive line Phillip Rivers has ever played behind. So if he can just, you know, be smart with his decision making, not turn the ball over a lot, this team is going to be really, really good in a division that's not going to be really, really good on paper, or that it feels like when we've talked over the last, you know, month or so, a few different times, that we're both not really high on the rest of the teams in their division, which is a lot of what it is in football too, right? As much as it is liking one team, it's about kind of not liking the others, you know, or disliking the other spots as much as we get to a team like the Jags, who I like what the Jags have been doing, building their team. I think they're trying to build a team like they used to with a lot of the young, really good, talented defensive weapons, but they feel like on paper they're definitely a team that is going to be one of the worst teams in the league this year. And they're going to start out with the Colts at home, and then they go on the road and play the Titans. But they do have some winnable games. They get the Dolphins at home. They travel to the Bengals. They get a Lions team at home, which we don't know what we're going to get out of the Lions yet. So there are a few, but I don't even know if I can get to 5 with them.
I mean, I have their ceiling at 4, but I'll be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if they go 0-16. I
can't get to 5 with them. No, I can't. No.
I mean, because the 2 divisional games to starting off 2 divisional games is always rough. They do get a break with Miami traveling in for the Thursday night game.
But Miami's not Miami from last year. They're not awful. And if that's Fitzpatrick early in the season, then that's more competitive probably than even if it is Tua.
But it's just statistically the home team has the advantage, though, and that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Sure, so, absolutely. Absolutely. And the Lions game, too, but they're unfortunately – they're going to be bad. Minshew Mania, man. He's going to need to really carry this squad to a couple wins this year.
I'm just not high on that kid either. You know what I mean?
He feels to me like a good backup quarterback.
Yeah.
Like a good guy who he's great if somebody gets hurt and you need him to come in for a game and maybe win you a game. But I don't think he can build, you can build a team around him, or he's like maybe a franchise quarterback starter.
Kind of like a Colt McCoy. Like he's reliable. He can come in, play a couple of games, serviceable, but you don't want him to roll him out
especially
every week.
In this situation. Like if you put him in a situation where everything else around you was really strong and he just had to maybe make some plays and then he'd be okay. But if he's in a situation where he's going to have to really make plays for you, I think you're going to be in a little bit of trouble as we get to the Chiefs. Man, another team with as you would expect, a really high over-under total, 11.5, coming off their Super Bowl win. They kick things off with the Chargers right away. What I like about their schedule is they've got some fun games on paper, right? Especially the matchups with Mahomes. You get a Mahomes-Watson. You get Mahomes versus Lamar. You get Mahomes versus Brady in Week 12. You get Mahomes versus Breeze in Week 15. So you do get some marquee games with them. I don't think they have the most difficult schedule in the world. I don't think they have the easiest schedule in the world. It feels just kind of like to me, they feel probably I wouldn't bet a team that's 11.5 probably ever, because that's just such a high number in the NFL, but they're probably 11-win team or so.
I took the under 11.5 at plus money. I just feel the Broncos
that's
are
just
better.
Too high of a number to take. Yeah.
I like the Chargers defense, and they're coming off that Super Bowl, so there's naturally that Super Bowl letdown. And I mean, if you look at their schedule, I mean, they have the Texans at home on Thursday Night Football. That line's at 10. I mean, I'm tempted to lock it in at 10 right now because I think it's going to drop a little bit. Then they travel to L.A., where the Chargers open up that new stadium. And then they travel to the Ravens. So, I mean, they could be 1-2 after the first 3 weeks.
And then we don't know what Patriots team we're going to get. I don't think the Patriots are going to be as good, but we don't know. So we can't look right now and say that's an immediate win when they come home and have the Patriots and then the Raiders. And then they got to go travel and play 2 really tough defenses. They got to go at the Bills and then at the Broncos. Like, those are not going to be easy road games, either one of them.
And the Bills game is a Thursday night game. So you're going to play the Raiders late, and then you're going to have to travel. I mean, that's a short week. That's a perfect situation. I have the Bills circled to play.
Yeah.
That's one of my games I have circled. And then I'm definitely going to play the Chargers. I'm definitely going to play the Texans. And then after the Bills game, they'll have 10 days to prepare for that Broncos game, which in Week 7 I'm totally pumped for. And then they have the Jets and Panthers, which are like the 2 games are winnable. And then they have the bye. Then right after the bye, at Vegas for the Sunday night game, Bucks at home, Sunday night game at Denver. That's a tough 3 little game stretch. And then if you look at Weeks 15 and 16, the Falcons' offense is going to be able to keep them in games in Week 16, and going to the Saints is going to be tough. And even Week 14, that's a December game, and you're a cold weather team going to a hot Miami. That's going to be a tough one. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if I actually bet the Dolphins Week 14 and the Saints Week 15, just because cold weather teams going to a warm environment, that's always tough in December. And plus, it's between the Broncos and Saints.
You're coming off the Super Bowl, so everyone's going to want to bet you chalk-wise. So, yeah, for me, I'd be under their total. I think they'll still be a good team, but that's just too high to play in a schedule that looks like they have lots of spots where they could have a hiccup. Mm-hmm. Let's go to the Raiders, the Vegas Raiders. Their over-under is 7.5. Man, great start to the season for them last year, and then they faltered late. Not sure if I love what they did with some of their moves in the offseason as far as the draft. But they do have a winnable game to start. They go on the road, they play the Panthers, and then they come home for a huge Vegas opener, and I believe that's the Monday night game, right, where they play the Saints in week number 2. Then they travel on the road, the Patriots. What's difficult is that in their first 5 games before the bye, they travel to Carolina and then to the Patriots, and then they play Kansas City. So that's not easy as far as travel in the first 5 weeks. And then the 2 home games that you have are the Saints and the Bills. Those aren't really gimmies.
I mean, I find it funny with how many primetime games they have for a team with so many questions. It's kind of like all the lead announcers teams wanted to go there.
Vegas, yep.
I just remember when I looked at the stat, when the Vegas Knights opened up, they were 29-10-2 at home in their first season. And are people going to be going out and partying when they get there? 'Cause I don't even know if stuff's going to even be open then. Like,
we don't even know.
Nightlife is going to really.
And that's a great point with a lot of what's going to happen in this season too, right? Like when and I know you're someone who generally is doing this too. Just some like a big picture thing. If there aren't crowds, home field advantages are going to be taken away massively in a lot of situations, right? Especially if
Superdome, Arrowhead.
Especially if they're not in cold weather, especially if like weather isn't coming into play, So those are going to be real situations where you will want to play the underdogs almost blindly, because no matter what, they're going to be the better play because there's just not going to be that home field built in as much without the crowd.
Oh, I know. And I was actually looking forward to this Vegas stadium because it looks unbelievable with all the videos I'm seeing on Twitter. Week 1, definitely play against, like I said earlier. Week 2, I'm actually going to bet on them opening up that new stadium. Mm-hmm. But then it's that East Coast, West Coast, East Coast. There's that back and forth stuff, which is just insanely hard. And then they have the Chiefs, and then their bye comes at week 6. Sunday night football with the Bucks. I mean, this is a tough little schedule just with all the zigzagging back and forth with them. Mm-hmm. And then they have the back-to-back road games at the Falcons, at the Jets. Before that, they have the Chiefs Sunday night game. I mean, they're scheduled to end the season weeks 11 through 15. That's a tough little jaunt because they have Sunday night football, 2 road games, Colts at home, Chargers on Thursday night football. And then they finish the season with the Finns and Broncos at home. I don't know. I'm just not in on this team just because I feel they have so many questions.
Me too.
And also
the quarterback. What's going to happen?
They're 0-5 going in the bye.
Mariota coming in.
Is it Mariota time? I just don't. They just have so many questions. I mean, they only have 66 targets available, and they drafted 3 wide receivers. And they brought in a million tight ends because they have Witten. Who is a kid? That's
Waller.
Nicholas. Yeah, no, Waller. And who's the guy from Jacksonville that's related to the actor? O'Shea or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they have all those tight ends. So, I just don't know what they're doing on offense. And then I was so pumped because Gruden said, we're going to get Jacobs. He's going to be the receiving back now. But then they just signed Booker from Denver to be the third down back. So it's I just don't know what the heck they're doing. I just don't know what the picture is in Mayak's head.
We get to the Chargers. Their over-under is 8. It looks like it's going to be Tyrod Taylor probably starting the season for them, and then we'll see when or if Herbert ends up coming in and taking the reins there. But they open up on the road against the Bengals, but as you mentioned, this is a 4:05 game, so this isn't an early game. You don't really get as much of that time issue when they travel. Then they come home and they play the Chiefs and the Panthers. They should be 2-1. Through 3 before they have to go travel for their tough road games at Tampa and at the Saints. And then you come home and you play the Jets among a stretch of 4 super winnable games. They could be 6-3 by the bye week through 9.
I mean, for me, it's just weeks 1 through 5. That's the tell for me for how good they're actually going to be. I like their defense. I mean, I think their defense is good enough to keep them in games. I just got to see their offense because they said they're going to run this version of the Ravens offense with Tyrod. I just got to visually see how that's going to look. But that week 3 spot with the Panthers at home, sandwiched in between KC and the Bucs, that spot's definitely circled for me. But I mean, you're totally right. They could easily be 6-3 going into that bye. But after that bye, they have 2 tough road games at Broncos, at Bills,
and with the Chiefs. Yeah, on the road at the Chiefs too. So you got those tough games coming. It's like they have to get to 6-3.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, they could just be done. But I mean, I just question, like, is Tyrod really that guy? And if they're 2-7, do you
make the change already?
Fans pressure Herbert, and I'm not a Herbert guy.
Neither at all. I did not like him at all. I've never been high on him. He just feels like a guy. I would not have picked him with such a high pick. He feels like someone that you could have you could have gotten that type in the second, third round. I just don't. To me, that was a waste of a pick.
He kind of reminds me of Mitch Trubisky, to be honest with you. Like a physical Mitch Trubisky. You know what I mean? Like some guy that just can't make the throws and just kind of relies on his feet a little bit too much, misses some easy throws.
He just doesn't seem like he has it. Whatever it is. Like he checks a lot of boxes on paper, right? He looks sexy, he's big, he's got the big arm. Like you see that he's not slow, he can move around a little bit. He does kind of remind me of Josh Allen too. In that like he's got a lot of what you want, but I don't know if he's going to be like the right guy to make the right decisions at the right time to lead your franchise. The
thing with him is like, if he's such a big arm quarterback, why did Oregon lead the nation in screen passes last year at 21%? Like that stat just blows my mind. Like if he's like this big, strong arm quarterback, why is he just throwing screens? Why don't they just open up the playbook? That's something that's a big red flag to me.
We get to another Pac-12 quarterback on the Rams. The Rams, their over-under is 8.5. And I'm a Rams fan, but I don't like the schedule, and I'm a little bit down on the team this year overall. I think there are going to be some spots to play them. But, the Cowboys game, right, week 1 at home, that's not an easy game. Then you got 2 tough road games where you got to go play the Eagles and the Bills. You got kind of a weird game with the Giants when you come home, because then you got 2 more road games after that and a big one with the 49ers. And then later on after the bye, you've got another 49ers game. You got your 2 games with the Seahawks there to look at. The early part of their schedule is going to really tell the tale for them too, because in the late half, they've got some winnable games in there with the Patriots and Jets at home. They got a home game with the Cardinals there. The at Bucks game, maybe they can go back and forth and up and down with them. I just don't know if this team is really that good.
I mean, the one future I played with them is Akers 16-1 to win Rookie of the Year. You're not going to draft the guy in the second round unless he's going to be your featured back. And in that McVay zone running scheme, I think he's going to thrive. So, and even if the Rams have offensive line issues, I mean, his O-line was bad at Florida State, and he was still putting up numbers. I love the Rams in week 1. They're getting 2.5 points with the Cowboys opening up that new stadium.
Yeah, that's a game I like too.
Totally going to be on that. But then the back-to-back road games on the East Coast is brutal. And then you come back for one game, and then you have to go back to the East Coast.
To Washington again. Yeah.
And then you go San
at
Francisco.
49ers.
I mean, that week 5 spot, I'm going to probably be on the Redskins. I'm going to probably be on the Bears because I always do that back-to-back prime
in the in-between,
game.
And they got 3 and 4 road games there, and that's the only one at home, yeah.
And I mean, like, if they get to week 10, I mean, and they're somewhat, like, 4-3, like, they could sneak around because their schedule, they don't have as much traveling the second half of the schedule.
Yep,
they'll be
100%.
more the West Coast. So, I mean, if they can kind of BS their way to like a 5-3, even 4-4 at week 9, I would feel pretty good about them because there's an extra wild card spot we have to remember.
Yeah, you can split maybe with the Seahawks and then you can split with the Cardinals in the second half. If you could beat the Patriots and Jets, and all of a sudden that second half doesn't look nearly as difficult as the first half with the question marks.
But the interesting thing with the week 14 one is the Patriots actually on week 13 they play the Chargers, so they don't have to travel. The Rams actually are the ones that are going to have to travel for a home Thursday night game because they play the Cards, which I found kind of weird.
We get to the Miami Dolphins. They're over-under. They're up to 6.5. A much more talented team this year, but still feel like they're a year or two away, maybe a team to play in some spots. They start on the road at the Patriots, and they come home and play the Bills. and they go on the road and play the Jags, which the problem with that, obviously, as you mentioned, like, the Jags aren't great, but you're traveling, and Miami's not necessarily a team that we can count wins, count anyone as a win when we look through their schedule. And then they got a tough, week 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Like, that's not easy. You got the Seahawks at the 49ers, at the Broncos. You come home, but you're playing the Chargers. But it is early, which is nice. And you're playing the Rams, back to back, and you're playing both of them home in early games. But those are teams that are better than you. And then you got to go on the road and play the Cardinals. So I mean, we'll find out how, I guess, good or bad this team is going to be this year. But I guess divisionally, you don't have to circle the 2 Patriots games as automatic beatdowns anymore. And Miami has generally played the Patriots pretty well. You think the Patriots are going to be upset about Miami ruining their bye in week 1?
Oh my God. Like, they're going to be fired up for that game. And I mean, they're definitely going to come out firing. 2 divisional games to start. I mean, that's rough. And then the short week to traveling to Jacksonville is going to be tough. Even if you have the veteran Fitzpatrick under center, that's just going to be tough just because it takes their body like so long to recover. But at least they have 10 days to prepare for Seattle. And then that two-game road stretch, I mean, with at San Francisco and at Cleveland, that's a tough stretch for a team. And then the Chargers, at least you get the Chargers for an early game, Rams for an early game, and then the Cards and the Jets. But, I mean, if they're 2-8, I mean, I could easily see Tua coming in on week 11. And the funny thing is, and I've never seen this before, it goes Jets by, then at Jets. I mean, that's kind of a weird part of the schedule for me. And then they finish off with 2 games on the road. I mean, this is kind of a tough schedule for the Dolphins. And the thing about the Dolphins is people talk about their secondary improving. With how the NFL is, you can only guard someone in pass coverage for a little bit. If you have no one that can that can rush the quarterback, you're dead. And they don't have any pass rushers. So I really think that's going to be their big thing that hurts them. They did improve the secondary. Week 5, I'm definitely all in Matt Breida for his revenge spot because they travel to San Francisco. And I think Breida, because I think they're going to be down in a lot of games, is going to have a lot of fantasy value in PPR formats. But I just have a lot of questions for this Dolphins team. I mean, I like some of the stuff they did in the draft. I mean, I'm not a Tua guy either, so I don't know. I mean, I'm not as high in them. I saw Nick Wright had them at 9-7. I don't see them winning over 6 games.
Neither. I think they're more talented. I actually like their coaching staff too. It's hard to get there when you look through their schedule.
Did you see their press conference when they introduced Tua? It was like the weirdest thing in the world too.
No, I didn't.
It was like really weird. Like normally, like when you have this like
franchise QB,
you want to be excited, pick. But like they were totally downplaying him and like, oh, it just came down, and at the end we just decided to go with him instead of. It was like the weirdest thing in the world. It was the weirdest press conference I've seen in a while. And I wouldn't be surprised if it comes out like the owner like told them to draft Tua.
That they weren't as high on him and that there were some birdies.
It was a real weird press conference.
Not a great way to inspire faith in your new rookie. You know what I mean? Like, but not acting like you're not that high on him. Just wanted to remind you about one of the sponsors of That's What G Said podcast, Sarah Candle Company. Visit sarahcandles.com, CERA candles.com. Use the promo code GINO for 10% off of your entire purchase. These are all natural soy wax candles. They burn longer. They are better for you than the candles out there that have that traditional paraffin wax. I know the people from this company personally. I've grown up with them my whole life. They love candles, and the goal was to have an affordable candle that everyone can enjoy. Use that promo code GINO. My favorite is Fresh Roses. The Fresh Roses scent is awesome. If you're a horse racing fan, they got Del Mar in there. You ever want to know what Del Mar smells like, but you couldn't make it out there? Order your candle right now from Sarah Candle Company. The website, CERAcandles.com. SarahCandles.com. Promo code GINO for 10% off your purchase. Get your past performances out, horse racing fans. We're going to turn to May the 21st, Thursday, and we're going to go to 3 different racetracks. It's going to be Gulfstream, it's going to be Churchill Downs, and then it's going to be Golden Gate. So let's begin over at Gulfstream. Get your past performances out. We have your 3 best plays for Gulfstream Park on Thursday, and we kick things off in race number 1 with the number 5, Act Like Artie. This is a 3-year-old filly. She's raced 3 times so far. And she really hasn't been bad in any of them. In particular, the two races I like are the last two. So let's go back to March the 8th. She's coming in, making her first start of 2020. She had a couple months off. So she's 3 deep. She's in between going into the first turn. And she's 3 wide. She's a couple lengths off. She looms up. But I think the wide trip off the bench, hurts her a little bit. Then she comes back in her most recent start on April the 9th. She sits 3 deep into the turn. She loses a little bit of ground, but then she's able to settle inside. She's 5th. She's about 4 lengths off. She just gets caught with nowhere to go. She's waiting, and she's able to save all the ground, but she has to lose some momentum, and she has to lose a little bit of ground when she shuffles. She ends up working her way into a really nice spot on the rail. She just missed. I think if she wouldn't have had to kind of stop her momentum and wait a little bit and alter course and kind of work her way through a tight spot, I think she would have won that race. So to me, she's going to be really tough in here right back. I think if you get like 5-2, that's very fair value on her. She could be set for her absolute best, just one more little step forward, and she's going to be really, really tough. This isn't an easy race, though. There are a couple other directions to go. That's why I like to kind of take a stand sometimes in a race like this where there may be 3 or 4 horses that take some money. Ocean Air is going to take a little bit of cash. I wouldn't be totally shocked to see Windfall Profit take some money. La Babia, coming off some decent races, is going to get a little money too. Come Storming is going to get a little money. So let's go with Act Like Artie to kick things off at Gulfstream Park. We'll make a win wager if we can get like 5-2 and maybe an early single to kick off your pick 5s. We get to race number 6 for the second play, and it's going to be the number 9 Big Treasure. This 3-year-old, he deserves another shot at this level. He dropped into the maiden 16 level last time out, which is probably one of the softer spots that he's been in. And he was asked early, but then he was squeezed out of a spot. He settled 7th. He was 5 off, but he made an unnecessarily early 4-wide move, and he was just tired and all in early. Now you get a big jock switch. I think Big Treasure makes a lot of sense in here, and maybe if you're going to start a late pick 5, this would be a horse I would build some tickets around. If we can get anything around 7-2, I would be ready to make a win wager on the number 9 Big Treasure in race number 6. Third and final play for the day at Gulfstream is going to be in race number 9. Let's go to the number 2 Mucho. This was a super highly regarded horse at one time. He was actually favored, you can see in the Grade 1 Hopeful. And he has some ability. This looks to me like a really good spot for him. He's run well at Gulfstream Park. He's coming out of a race that he just got he got a horrible trip, and it was a little unlucky. He got the shuffle from the inside. He lost ground. He lost momentum. He came on again. He moved in between horses. He actually got up to second in the stretch before fading. There's a lot of question marks in this race, and I think he has some versatility. We saw at Churchill 2 back. He can close and come from way out of it. He has enough speed to kind of put his nose into it wherever he need be. Mucho has some ability. Now, I do have some concerns, right? I don't want to take too short of a price on him. I want at least like 4-1, and he does tend to get played a little. He's coming out of a productive race. We saw Winds of Change come back to win optional 62. Killybeg's captain is a nice horse. He is facing a group that all hasn't really raced in a while, right? I mean, the 2 horses to the outside have a recency edge. That's why I do think Fast Pass is worthy of including in some of your exotics, a horse who likes to win, and he might be able to just kind of grind and pick it up at 6.5 furlongs. Because if Mi Tre Por Ciento shows some speed, you get some speed from Wentz from the inside, I'm not sure if Jaguar Paws is going to be able to have the speed to keep up with them. Who knows with Admiral Lynch, not exactly slow there. Cool Arrow's not exactly slow. So this could end up being one of those races that these horses are a little tired late with that 6.5 furlongs being the key. So I hope Mucho can sit a really nice trip, maybe mid-packing here. Let's use the 2, let's use the 7 Fast Pass underneath. So at Gulfstream Park for Thursday, 3 best plays. Race number 1, the 5, Act Like Artie. If we can get anything around 5-2, we'll play a win wager and maybe a single if you want to play some early exotics. In the 6th race, the number 9, Big Treasure. The value line there is 7-2. And in the 9th race, the number 2, Mucho. value line for that one. We want to get at least 4-1. That is Gulfstream for Thursday. Let's go from Gulfstream over to Churchill Downs. Churchill Downs, Thursday. Get your past performances out May the 21st. Let's jump right into it. The early pick 5 in race number 1. This is one of the 2-year-old races. It's a filly race, and it's really tough to, single in on the Wesley Ward fillies right now because he's actually been struggling with a lot of short-priced horses over the last, month or so since we started to see these 2-year-old races. I think the 7's a little bit interesting as a horse to include coming in with some laurel works for a barn who doesn't win a ton first time out, but I think is plenty capable. Make sure to use the 7 cool enough in some of your exotics. So I'll use 4-7 on one pick 5 ticket. We'll play another one in our bigger pick 5 ticket where I'm going to use the 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7 here. So we'll be using Mad Maddie, who's the first foal from an unraced dam. The rail won't be easy, but she's got some speed. She's showing some quickness. The Hopeful Princess, who's dam didn't win, but 3 siblings, a couple of them were multiple winners, and this is another one who seems to have a little bit of ability in the morning for a barn who's capable, plenty capable first time out. Obviously, Tequila Queen, the dam won the debut, was 6 for 10, was a grade 3 winner, grade 1 placed, won the first 6 starts. I mean, on paper, she looks really tough. It's just, I've seen too many of them recently go down in flames at short prices. The 6, Shake It Out West. The dam won her second start, was a 4-time winner with stakes placed. The lone sib of this one is a multiple winner. But this barn has not been very great with first-time starters overall. Just 1 for 48 over the last 5 years. And the win was going long at Mountaineer. I still think there's a little something there, so I will use that one on one of the pick 5s where I'm going to spread out a little bit and single later on in the ticket. So I've got this race 7-4, 2, 3, 6, kind of 7-4 on the top tier, 2, 3, 6 using on my pick 5. We go to race number 2 here. So for me, the top pick in the first is a 7, cool enough. In race number 2, the 5T Loves the Flight is legit. Like, recently he's locking heads with, Mind Control and Frenzy Fire, grade 1 winners. The concern I have with him, I think if he shows up and he's like got a B+ to A- effort, he wins this race. I'm just a little bit concerned because he's got kind of like a weird spotty work pattern. And I don't know if he's going to come into this race like quite fit enough. So we'll use T Loves the Flight, but I have the 5 as, a second or third horse in here with the 7 Ruler of the Nile. Seems like the most likely winner of this race to me. A horse who loves Churchill Downs, who comes back after some decent races at Oaklawn Park and is in nice form, coming out of some strong races. And then the 9, I'm Corfu, who's pretty fast but can also sit. He just doesn't love to win races as of late, but he's been right there. And then the 1, Barry Lee, who's going to send harder from the inside. So I think those are the 4, 7, 9, 5, 1. In race number 3, the 2, Stylish Ash, is going to be the horse I single. We have a horse who hasn't raced since January of 2019, and we saw this one going a mile on the grass in her debut. I think she's just coming out of a strong race. She actually showed some ability in that field. If you look at the group now, the horse who won that day is now a 4-time winner. The 3rd place finisher is a multiple winner in stakes place. The horse who was 4th, we just saw come back and win over the weekend and is a multiple winner now too. I just think she's better than this group. Nobody scares me at all in here. I think Stylish Ash wouldn't have to be very much to crush this group. And because if you're looking at other horses like Revealing Quality and Drop Dead Gorgeous, who, sure, they can win. And Drop Dead Gorgeous is probably the one to catch in here. But give me the 2. We'll single on one ticket. On my other backup ticket, we'll play the 2 and the 12. Stylish Ash, and we'll use Drop Dead Gorgeous along with the 2. We move to race number 4 here, and 8,000 claimers. The 2 Spike Stroll taking a humongous drop in class. She hasn't shown a whole lot lately. I actually played her in a couple of the spots. But so to me, it's hard having played her in some of those spots, not at least giving her a look in here. I obviously never think it's a positive when horses take this kind of a drop in class, but if she's not a horse that gets like heavily overbet, it all comes down to price, right? If a horse like this, you don't really like to play them when they're heavily backed or when they're a huge favorite. If they're a decent price, sure, throw them in. But for me, I guess I'll start with the 6 Junior Gilliam. This is one of my better plays of the day. He had a slow start in his most recent race. He was last early. He was 4 wide. He was 10 lengths off. He makes a big early wide move, 6 wide, up to the lead. He ends up hanging a little bit late after that big move. He finishes second. That's going 6 furlongs. Now he's going to stretch out and go the mile. He actually has some speed. There is not a lot of speed in here. I would not be shocked to see Junior Gilliam really close to the lead. And if that's the case, he might be very, very tough to run down. So Junior Gilliam I'm going to play on top. The 9 Summer Revolution heading into the Diodoro barn beat Junior Gilliam last time out, was super impressive, and now you're going to stretch back out and you're going to head into a barn who's just unbelievable first start off the claim. I think 6 and 9 are the top tier for me in this race. After them, that's where I go to the 5 Sun Brown. We haven't seen since last year, but you know what? You take a look at some of those Hawthorne races. They're not bad, and he's behind some productive horses who have come back and run really, really well. So Sun Brown, I have in underneath spots. Also the 2 Spike Sherrill that I mentioned, and then the 12 Hinford is another one who, if maybe Junior Gilliam doesn't go to the lead, Hinford, perhaps from the outside, sends hard. There just isn't a ton. Maybe it's Ernie Banks. Like one of these 2 or 3 horses has a big opportunity to steal this race. There just isn't as much speed. So if anyone gets that idea, tries to get brave, likely a couple others are going to sit back off them. 6, 9, 5, 12, 2 in race number 4. And then we move to race number 5. And I'll close out a pick 5 here with 3 horses. To me, the 6 is obviously the one to beat. I think his Giant is, just a measuring stick in here. If nobody jumps up, he wins this race. The 12 Grade, I like what he's shown most recently. You look at his last 3 starts. He can sit a little bit off the pace. I do think it's going to be a really, really good opportunity for him cutting back from a mile and the 6.5 furlongs to the 6 furlongs. So I'm just hoping he doesn't get hooked a little too wide and end up getting shuffled, losing some ground way out there. But if he's able to kind of tuck in and not be really outrun, he's going to be a little more fit late. And then Jersey Agenda. To me, Jersey Agenda is the real wild card in here. Because he showed ability early on, and he just hasn't won in a while. But can he get out front, get brave, faced a ton better throughout most of his career? 5, 6, 12 in race number 5 at Churchill. So the pick 5s I'm looking at, a couple different approaches. In race 1, so the big one that I'm going to play where I single in race number 3 with Stylish Ash, it's going to go like this. Race 1, pick 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, with 1, 5, 7, 9, with 2, 5, 6, 9, 12, with 5, 6, 12. Then I'll come back and I'll play a backup ticket that'll start in race 1 with 4, 7, with 5, 7, 9, with 2, 12, with 6, 9, with 5, 6, 12. Couple plays later on in the card at Churchill to mention. Let's get you to race number 7. I've followed the 8 stylishly for a while. She's a good turf sprinter. She should not be this price. If she's like 8-1, that's worthy of a win wager. She just seems like she's, on numbers and figures, a tad below some of the best in here. But let's use an example, right? On October the 14th, she wasn't that far behind a horse named Storming Lady, who Devil's Dance has, traded decisions with and has been behind a couple times, you see, crossing the wire. So play that common rival game. I don't think she's that far out of this group. This barn has already got a couple wins at the meeting from last weekend. Her last start on April the 18th, they took a shot on the slop. Just put a line right through it. It was her first start in 6 months, and it was the first start for a new barn. So what's nice is she got that fitness race out of the way, right? She should have a little more oomph today. Let's go, and she goes back to the grass. Look, just key off of the turf sprints. This is a lightly raced 5-year-old, still with some upside. Last time we saw her sprinting on the turf, October the 14th, she was 5th early, she was 5 off, and it was a small field, and she was chasing lone speed. She was wide at the back of the pack in a small field chasing lone speed. That's just not the recipe for winning. She can sit a little closer. She's got a little tactical speed to her. Stylishly. Make sure to throw her in any of your late exotics. And if she's in the double digits, I'm going to definitely play her to win there in race number 7 at Churchill Downs. That's the 8. Stylishly, we go to race number 9. Final play of the day. And it is going to be the number 9. And that's Mr. Dumas. I mean, he's coming out of some tough races. He's been in 4 consecutive really, really strong races. So he wins the Grade 3 Commonwealth. Then he tries the Hollywood Derby. You put a line right through that race, right? Because it's in November, doesn't run well. Maybe a little bit overmatched. He's 17-1 in that field. So he comes back in February against Grade 3 Company. He's 7th early. He's 10 off on the inside. He's behind horses while Guido runs off. And you know those races when there's a runoff horse? They're always a little bit weird. And Mr. Dumas gets shuffled. He's in tight. He loses ground. He makes an early 3-wide move before flattening out. But he still keeps trying late. You'll notice he's only beaten he's beaten less than 3 lengths. Comes back on March the 28th. He gets hooked 4 wide. He's in between horses into the turn. He's 3-4 wide all the way. He makes a 4-wide bid at the top of the lane. He keeps trying, but he just lost too much ground. That's what I like about him is he really does keep trying. Now, the unfortunate thing, is he going to get forced into a wide trip again in here? I hope not. I think he's got a little class relief against this group. Mr. Dumas. Let's give him top billing. And we'll make him our top selection in race number 9. So, one more time, horses throughout the card to use. In the first, the 7 Cool Enough. The second, the 7 Ruler of the Nile. The third, the 2 Stylish Ash will be a single. Fourth, the 6 Junior Gilliam. I really like the 7th, the 8 Stylishly. And the 9th, the 9 Mr. Dumas. Will probably get bet a little bit. If you get anything over like 3-1 or so, that seems really fair on a horse who is in a good spot. We just don't want to take much shorter than that. So, best of luck at Churchill on Thursday. Let's get you to Golden Gate. Final racetrack for Thursday, May the 21st. Let's get you over to Golden Gate. Get those past performances out. And let's turn to race number 3 for Golden Gate. You can actually play a pick 5 starting in this 3rd race. And I think the 4 would be a good horse to single. There's just not a lot of other early speed in this race. I think she could have a major pace advantage going first start off the claim for a really good barn off the claim, and then you pick up Hernandez, who seems to know her well. I think you look around, you see no other speed, and you send hard. Let's go with No Spin Zone as a single in that early pick 5. Or any kind of early exotics. You know, if you're playing the early exotics or you play the late exotics, however one you want to do it here, to me, this horse is a single and a horse that you can maybe key some tickets around. Let's go to race number 4. And there are a couple to look at in here, but for me, I guess it's Malibu Alex, who I'd make a win wager if you can get 5-2. She looks like she's really going to sit a very nice trip in here. And again, we'll be going back to Hernandez. But I did think that between the Canada, Alsmere, and Malibu Alex, you probably have this race pretty well wrapped up. But Alsmere just missed late last time. Ran really well and will probably be right on the lead again. Malibu Alex will be trying to run him down. Canada, the same, was behind the more recent next out winning King Eddie. And after a slow start, did come on late, so you'll probably get Canada on the turn back really rolling late. The issue that I have is I just hope he's not too far back in here. So Alsmere, Malibu, Alex, probably the two that get the better trips, and Canada will have to try to get a little lucky and run them down late. We move to race number 5, and the 6 Cyber coming into a barn who's really good with their new acquisitions. Cyber debuted against much better on the grass at Santa Anita back in May. So, like a year ago, you treat this horse almost like a first-time starter in here. Cyber is a horse I'm going to be using in all the exotics in race number 5. The 8 Eyesore Fire probably is the one that they're going to have to run down in here. Another race on paper that doesn't scream out a heck of a lot of speed. And Muskoka looks like the one to beat. This gelding on the big drop-in class. If he's got anything at all left, he'll be really, really tough in here for the brothers Disormo. 6, 8, 11 in race number 5 as we move to race number 6. So Cyber is the top selection in there in that 5th. The 6th race, Exactamente has plenty of success going long on the turf when you dig deep a little bit. It was just the last time we saw her going long on the turf, she was facing much tougher in a first-level allowance group. Look at the turf sprint races that you see on the page. They're not bad at all. She's going to go second start off the bench, gets a little bit of class relief, dropping from the 16 to the 12-5 level in here. I think this is a great spot for Exactamente. We'll make a win wager if we get anything around 6-1. Others to include in here, the 5 Splashing. Obviously, top betting choice will be really, really tough. And Side Effect, going to go first off the claim for an excellent claim barn coming out of a productive race. It would be 4, 5, 6 in the exotics, and anything over 6-1 we'll make a win wager on Exactamente. And then in race number 7, it's going to be Dynamite Ride, the number 6. He just is much, much faster than this group. He's going to go second start off the long layoff. He really needed his last start, and who is going to push him? To the outside, asking for trouble, I don't think is even, close to quite as quick early on as Dynamite Ride is. The 9, my friend George will be on the ticket, and the 7, asking for trouble in the closeout leg, but it's Dynamite Ride who's the top selection and the one we'll make a win wager at 7-2. So the pick 5 will play. We'll single the 4, no spin zone in race 3 with the 3, 4, 5, with the 6, 8, 11, with the 4, 5, 6, with the 6, 7, 9. No spin zone, an early exotic single in the 3rd. In race 4, Malibu Alex, a win wager if we can get 5-2. In race number 5, Cyber, we can make a win wager if we can get 5-1. In race 6, Exactamente, win wager at 6-1 or so. And then in race number 7, Dynamite Ride, the top selection there. We'll make a win wager if we can get around 7-2. That is Golden Gate for Thursday. Hope you enjoyed Golden Gate, Churchill Downs, and Gulfstream Park. We'll have some weekend racing for you on the next episode of That's What G Said podcast. We are going to hear a quick word from one of our sponsors, and then we're going to get to Jason Beem and Danny Kovoloff as we discuss Wrestlemania 5. Match by match, we go back in time to 1989 when the Mega Powers explode. One of the sponsors of That's What G Said podcast is Cindy Carava, full-service realtor, and I am here over in Glendora at Coldwell Banker with Cindy Carava. Cindy, how was 2019 for you? Tell us a little bit about what kind of stuff you were working on.
Hi, Gino. Thanks for having me. 2019 was just really great. I had a great year selling homes all the way from Altadena, Arcadia, Monrovia, out to Upland and Ontario just recently. The market has been really good. We're looking forward to 2020 with an increase in home prices about 5.8% this year, opposed to last year where it was a little softer. We saw more like homes averaging about 3.5% in increase in value. It's also looking great for buyers. The interest rates right now are going to be staying under 4%. So if you've been on the fence about thinking about buying a home, now is the time to do so, with interest rates still staying low.
And you offer more services than just the buying, selling, and leasing homes. Tell us about some of the other services that you offer and what a full-service realtor really is.
So you're right, Gino. Besides me being a full-service realtor of finding properties for my clients to buy or selling their homes or finding rentals for them, I also have a plethora of resources like handyman, contractors, electricians, plumbers. Like I said, if you're thinking about getting a home loan, I actually work with 2 great lenders that I can recommend to anybody.
And you're all over the internet, social media, websites. Let us know some of the places where we can find you. I know I've seen some reviews on Yelp and on Zillow. Everyone always has positive things to say. Everybody hears me raving about you all the time. But where can everyone else find out information about you or contact?
Thank you, Gino. Yeah, I am on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. And you can contact me on my website, which is www.cindykarava.com, or my email, which is cindyc.realtor@gmail.com, or feel free to call or text me on my cell phone, which is 626-394-6400.
Cindy is awesome. She's one of the kindest and most genuine people I've ever met. I promise you, you will enjoy every minute you interact with her. So thank you very much, Cindy. Appreciate all of your support from That's What G Said podcast.
Thank you, Gino. Have a great day, everyone.
We are back for another old wrestling rewatch, and I'm glad that Danny selected this one. It's going to be Danny Kovoloff and Jason Beem joining me to talk a little Wrestlemania 5. We're going to go back to 1989, and so now, if you've been following along with some of our old wrestling recaps, now we've basically hit WrestleManias 3 through 10. Which is really cool. I think, Jason, you and I talked WrestleMania 9 together alone, and then Danny joined us for WrestleMania 4, and then together we also hit on SummerSlam. I've hit the other WrestleManias with Andrew and with Darren, so we're going to be kind of completing a big era. Well, eventually, one day, we might go back to WrestleManias 1 and 2, but I don't know. They just aren't – it feels like the WrestleMania
Special
era.
Delivery Jones.
Yeah, the WrestleMania era, I think, really started in 3. So, Jason, Danny, fellas, how you doing? Mr. Beam, first we got to say belated happy birthday to you, buddy.
Thanks, pal. Yeah, it's 40 plus a day now.
There we go. And you look like you're having some fun with your editing equipment, and you're doing some good videos up on your YouTube channel. Let's get a cheap plug for the YouTube channel. I love watching you on there.
YouTube.com/Jason Beam. Smash that subscribe button.
Danny K, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. Jason, happy birthday. You don't look a day over 39.
I know, buddy. That's why all these people were telling me, like, oh, I told everybody I'm 39 and a half. I'm like, what are you going to do? It's better. I'd rather be 40 than 39 and a half because, at least I'm keeping going.
So if this was Gorilla and Jesse, we got a lot of age banter in this when Gorilla was saying,
"Oh yeah,
back
they
in
were."
Your day, and Jesse was getting a little bit pissed. What do you mean back in my
day?
Like, what do you mean with all that back in my day stuff, Gorilla? Yeah, which was fun, and I think this is the one thing I love. And I think the difference between watching as a kid and then now when we rewatch as an adult, because we look through a show like this, and you know what? There's a lot of good on this show. There's also a lot of bad on the show, or a lot of stuff that probably didn't need to be at WrestleMania, or maybe some things we could have cut out here and there. And if the show was a little tighter, I think it would have held up over the test of time, reputation-wise, a little bit better. But the 2 main event matches are good. We had a fun DiBiase Brutus match. We had a fun Andre, one of the last times there. He actually did a pretty damn good job for not being able to move a whole heck of a lot. There were some bells and whistles on that match. And, overall, this isn't a bad show. But just big picture thoughts, Jason, with the segment with the Piper's Pit segment that just felt like it was going on for a year. And then maybe, if you cut 3 other matches out and this show is an hour less, I think it would feel a lot better.
There was a little period toward the second third where I thought, okay, Dino Bravo, Ronnie Garvin, they're going to wrap it up here and bring it into the main event. And then I was like, oh God, there's still this one. And then there was this one. Yeah, I agree. But, it seems like there's some WrestleManias where they really try to get everybody in the card. So they move up, put a lot of matches in, try to kind of hammer through them. And then there's WrestleMania 9 was more of a less but longer matches kind of WrestleMania.
Mhm.
I mean, with
Yep.
the exception of the Gonzalez and stuff. But
Completely. You're
then,
right.
like eight the year before, it seemed like there was a billion matches, and so it's interesting how some years they do more and some a little bit less.
Danny, big picture thoughts on this Mania?
This is a long show that felt like a long show. I know you mentioned the Piper's Pit segment, also Run DMC with the WrestleMania rap. I don't watch that since the first time I got this on paper.
Me neither.
But what this show's missing was kind of that WrestleMania 4 had the year before, also another very long show, 2 tapes, was that overall narrative for the entire show that kind of tied it together. This was just a lot of matches, some better than the other, and way too much filler.
What was good is that both of the main event matches, like the title matches, really deliver. This is a good, we discussed how good Ultimate Warrior was with Macho Man, and they had great chemistry. He was also really good in the ring with Rick Rude. They had good back and forth. This was a good match for in general, not even just like good for what people would say Warrior matches. Like, it seems like he steps up on the big stage a lot of the time. And then, I mean, Savage was unbelievable in that main event. And we'll get to it a little bit more, but he was flying all over the place. He was just like, he looked tan as can be. He looked good. He was in great shape, and he was just running around like he knew this was going to be one of his big moments. And so some of the big matches delivered, but I kind of agree with you, Danny. Like, that was what through 4, which was kind of a long slog, was like, okay, we're getting through this tournament now. And here it's like, if we could have just removed maybe like the Bravo match that you mentioned, maybe you remove the Bad News Brown Duggan match, and then you remove those, like the Run DMC, and you remove the Piper's Pit, and then boom, this show is at like 10, 11 matches. You cut some of those really bull segments out, and I think it would have just felt cleaner on the rewatch, because both of you are right. It drags in some spots. And let's get through it. We'll just jump right into it. If you're talking the best storylines in the history of this company, WWF and now WWE, there's probably 3 to 5 that you'd mention. The Andre Hogan stuff you'd mention. You'd mention the Vince McMahon, Austin stuff, which came later in the Attitude Era. And this feud is probably right after that, as far as like all-time great, meaningful feuds. This was a feud that was built for about 18 months since Miss Elizabeth went and got Hulk Hogan's help to save Macho Man from Honky Tonk and the Hart Foundation, who were beating him up on Saturday night's main event. Just a great story that this company told back in like 88 through 89 and even a little later. And what's crazy is that through all of the years of WWF, WCW, Macho Man Randy Savage never got one pinfall over Hulk Hogan. Not one.
Wow, dude, really?
Not. I think that's kind of what keeps this from being a top feud of all time, and
right?
Just instead of number 3 or number 4. If it were a little more back and forth, and we'll get to that more later when we're talking about the main event, I'm sure.
So, I mean, right off the bat, I'm so much, when we watch these back, as I kind of hinted at a little earlier, I'm just so much more interested in the commentary a lot of the time now than even like the matches, which, some of them are good and I'm paying attention to, but like you just catch all these Easter eggs and how sharp Jesse and Bobby are, and in the back and forth here. And I mean, it gets going right away. We get the Vince McMahon, the mega powers explode at WrestleMania 5, and Jesse and Gorilla on commentary. We're in Atlantic City, Trump Plaza, back-to-back years now. But I will say they changed it a little bit. Like, I think the arena looks a little better this year as far as like a sporting arena. Doesn't look as much like a ballroom, kind of like it did the year before. They made a couple tweaks here. And Gorilla says, fasten your seatbelt, fasten your seatbelts. He kind of bumbles up right off the bat. And then
he sounded like he was struggling in the open.
Yeah.
As a whole, yeah.
It was, I agree. He was a little bit off. And actually what's funny, there were a couple weird things that are off about this right off the bat, the first 5 minutes. Well, first, Rockin' Robin singing the national anthem.
Not the best.
Franklin.
Oh, we've got Aretha Franklin in previous years, and you think about like the list of who's who. Gladys Knight. You get Willie Nelson later. You get a Stevie Wonder, didn't he? Or you get Little Richard later. Just unbelievable list. Aretha Franklin, like who's who. Or you mentioned Aretha, and then Aruba McIntyre, cousin of Tito Santana, according to Bobby. So we get Rockin' Robin, and she's terrible. And as soon as she's done singing, Jesse just lays into her right away. She better keep her daytime job, Gorilla, is all I gotta say. She better stick to wrestling. I mean, this was pretty bad.
Yeah, that was. I mean, it was. You know, she's a wrestler singing. I get that it's kind of fun, but it was. Yeah, it was awkward, and Jesse wasted no time in hammering her for it.
Yeah, it kind of struck me watching that. You know, here's Rockin' Robin. She was a women's champion at the time, which meant absolutely nothing, and relegated to just doing a terrible anthem rendition on the show. And 30 years later, you know, you got the girls main eventing it. So
yeah, that's a great point. It really is a good point to see how much time the times have changed. And then we get to our first match, King Haku versus Hercules. And actually, in the open on the original tape, you don't ever hear Howard Finkel making mistakes, but he actually calls him King Tonga on the intro. And if you go back and listen, you can tell that the sound of King Haku is a little bit different than his right before and right afterwards, because he went back and did it over and plugged that in. So right off the bat, you got Gorilla fumbling, you got an awful national anthem, and you get a botched entrance for your first guy that you're calling down the ring versus Hercules. Hercs have been a mainstay for these for early WrestleManias, and I will say Bobby looked good here. He looked sharp. He looked thin. He looked slimmed down, I think, probably because he had to get in the ring. You know, maybe he was in a little bit better shape, but he definitely didn't look like a bigger. I liked his look here. He was very sharp, and Haku's carried to the ring. You know, he's King Haku here, and Gorilla makes a wisecrack about Bobby and Jesse, and Jesse says, "I can't believe you'd say that about a broadcast partner of yours." And Gorilla wants to check Bobby's credentials, and so we're just having fun with the three of them. And then this was great. Bobby tells the fans to bow to the king, and Gorilla says he doesn't see many people genuflecting, and then Jesse just so quick. Oh, it's because they're on a long shot, Gorilla. You can't tell. We got to do a close up. You know, you can't see them all bowing down. You know, so just not even wasting any time for some great interactions here. And then Haku tries to get him from behind, and goes from behind early, and of course Gorilla with the Pearl Harbor job. He always would say that in an attack from behind. And Herc looked pretty good here. This was fine. Bobby distracts him. Herc goes outside. You know, Haku nails Herc from behind. I thought they were both moving pretty quick. Haku slowed things down a little bit, and just some of the simple things between Gorilla and Jesse, like when they're breaking down the bear hug, you know, and and Haku's technique in the bear hug, and Gorilla's talking about how he should be holding him a little higher, and Jesse saying lower, and then Jesse says, "What would a gorilla know about a bear hug?" and then Gorilla says something about Jesse, you know, putting his hands on referees before, and he said only if they had it come into them. This was fine. This was a fine opener. This wasn't a bad match at all. I actually kind of looking at on paper, I was like, Haku, Hercules for 6, but they went pretty quick. Hercules is a new babyface here. He ends up getting the win on a back suplex, and Jesse says a big win for the slave.
Danny, you want to go or me or?
Just. It's a weird thing, watching it for me. Whenever I hear any of the old school kings of the WWF music, and that music starts and it's not Jerry Lawler that comes out, it still throws me off every time.
It does seem weird. Yeah.
Harley Race, right? There was a string of King. Wasn't Hacksaw King Hacksaw for a while?
Hacksaw, Harley, Haku,
and then Macho.
And Macho Man you kind of took it for a while.
They one of the things this WrestleMania I thought did poorly was there was a number of big tough guy versus big tough guy matches, and I always feel like good workers and good workers have great matches. Good workers and bad workers can have good matches, but bad workers and bad workers have bad matches. Yep. And I don't mean that either Haku or Hercules is a bad worker. They just kind of have the same style.
It's like a level that they can hit. It's like they're only going to hit this high of a level.
Yeah, I mean, Bad News and Hacksaw is obviously horrendous, but because both of them weren't all that, you know, but they were both kind of neat characters. But I just think that when you have a big, slow, tough guy, like the dichotomy of a fast guy working with him, to me is always way more entertaining. And actually, the next match we see it almost perfectly because it's two huge guys versus two fast guys, and there's some really neat spots in that one. But this one, I mean, it was not a strong opener. It's interesting because like nowadays it seems like they usually open with more of a name, and that's kind of a good spot, that first match. But it seems like in some of the early Manias, that's not the case. Like it's kind of
they would build
throwaway matches.
Yeah, they would kind of build a crescendo. A lot of times what they would do too is like they have intermissions in the shows, so they would have like sort of a main event in the middle of the card, and then like their bigger matches stacked after it. But I kind of agree. It's weird to me that they didn't flip-flop maybe the first two matches, and maybe only because the Twin Towers win that match and they wanted to get like a babyface over win to get the crowd happy early on. But like the Rockers were a team that we would see open the card a lot.
Yeah, there was like 5 pay-per-views in a row. It seemed like it was them versus Tanaka and the Royal
Express.
Rumble and those guys.
Yeah.
And I think WrestleMania 7 they opened. There was a while there where they were always like the first, and because they were such a fun tag team. I mean, they were just awesome.
They were different. They could go and
tag team specialists.
Tag team specialists.
There was not a Rockers match where that phrase was not uttered.
Wasn't uttered, and they mention it in their promos. And how about this, Danny Kaye? We get our first look at the future Mr. WrestleMania. Shawn Michaels shows up on our television at WrestleMania 5.
And who would have thought what that was going to turn into? 1989 WWF was a different time, and just I know, Jason, you like the dichotomy of the tough guys versus the fast guys, but for me, back then and even now, like looking at it in the mirror or in the window through 30 years back, but there's no way that I'm thinking the two small guys are beating a pair of monsters or even being that competitive with them in the WWF in that era. Like it was always going to be bit of a squash, and Shawn looked good. Rockers bumped good, moved around well, but that was a strong win for the Towers, and that's what it was at the time.
I thought.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I thought what I love about this style of match is those guys, the smaller guys, the Rockers, are moving around, they're jumping, they're flying, and then every so often they get caught. And it ends on a getting caught, right? Where Boss Man just completely hammers it. Like he comes off the rope, he catches him.
Like a powerbomb.
I thought, that's the word. Yeah, and it was an awesome reaction to that because everybody was getting fired up. It's building. The Rockers are winning. They're winning. Bam! And it just totally took everything out of the crowd. And then here comes Air Africa, which Akeem has got to be one of the worst character switches of all time, right?
Ever.
Like
from the one man.
He was the one man gang, a bruiser from Chicago. By the way, he's like a Louisiana guy, the guy that plays these two. And then the next thing you know, he's Hakeem. Was there for a while where he was Hakeem and then Akeem, or that's Elijah? Never mind.
I think. Well, and I think the running joke was that he was a joke on Dusty Rhodes. And that he was made as someone
who
would
do the little hand dance,
the jive in, and he would kind of, and he would. So he was supposed to be someone that they was like a make fun of, because they would call him, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and he was the African Dream, because they would say that Dusty would kind of speak in Ebonics and things like that. So it was like all these inside jokes between companies, and he was a badass as the one man gang before and even after he left WWF. He was booked way different, and he was in that semifinal in the tournament against Macho. He ended up just getting himself disqualified, which is really stupid in WrestleMania 4. But so it's him and the Boss Man together versus the Rockers, and right off the bat, Jesse talks about how the Rockers are giving up too much size and weight, and Gorilla just says, I mean, that's what happens. You can't ask to wrestle guys 240 or less. Jesse says, I did. So there's like a really hot start for the Rockers. And as Jason mentioned, and Danny too, it's like this was good back and forth. You get it's like a perfect tag team match in how it's built. The small guys, work on them for a while. They use their speed. Then they get caught. And then they're going to be selling for a little while. And then there's a spot. They're going to get the hot tag. They're going to come back. And they're going to use their speed. And it was just really good back and forth here. Jesse said early he thinks that the Towers took the Rockers lightly. And Boss Man, he gets slimmer in the next couple years. He's massive here. He's huge.
Yeah, he's broad upstairs because he's always kind of. I mean, he's a good moving big man, and he's real thin in his legs and stuff. But his upper body's definitely bigger in this spot.
And Jesse's pissed about all the double teaming going on. And then, Jason, you mentioned that awesome Shawn Michaels goes to the top rope, jumps off. Boss Man catches him, turns him around with a powerbomb finish. It looked great. And then Akeem tags in, cleans up the garbage with a big splash for the W there. I believe that one went just over like 8 minutes or so.
Gino, we should mention one of the great clotheslines in WrestleMania history in this match.
Oh yeah,
Akeem misses one, turns around, and he just clobbers Michaels, and he completely sells it. And I mean, the gasp in the arena when it happens. And Jesse has that great line: "I believe he irritated Akeem." But it's an amazing clothesline. They actually, if you go on YouTube, like if you just Google Akeem clothesline, somebody has it kind of like just a little 10-second clip. I mean, he clobbers him.
Bumping all around Mr. WrestleMania, Shawn Michaels. So, 8:02, I believe, Twin Towers get the win here. And Shawn Michaels is in the history books in WrestleMania with an L right off the bat. And then we see Tony Schiavone. I think a lot of people forget Tony Schiavone had about a year where he was in the WWF. You now see him on All Elite Wrestling on TNT. You remember him as, the face of WCW for all those years, and even the NWA before that. And Schiavone talks about it a lot because he has his podcast now with Conrad, and they've had him for a few years, and he's very open. He's on a lot of shows. And he said that Vince, he was going to be the guy. Like, Schiavone was going to be the WWF announcer for the next forever. And he moved to Connecticut with his family, and he went up there with Vince, and he was there all the time, and they didn't like living there, and he decided, after a year to go back to Atlanta and to go back to WCW. So he's here. I always liked Schiavone. Schiavone was cool, and I think he does a good job here. He's kind of a fun, nostalgic voice to hear. We get DiBiase and Virgil, and DiBiase cuts his normal promo about being rich, and this is the first time we see the $1 million belt on TV. Jason, I thought this was fun. This match went 10. It was a pretty decent pace, though. Like, sometimes the DiBiase and Brutus's matches will kind of slow down a little bit, but if you just look from 87 to this, Brutus is much improved. I thought they both did pretty well. Like, this is a fun match. This is fine. I thought this is kind of like a good wheelhouse, like a 10-minute match or so. The matches on this show that were between 8 to 10 were kind of the more solid matches that you kind of felt invested in. The really short ones were the ones that you could kind of do without. This was fine for me.
Yeah, I thought it was one of Beefcake's better matches.
Yeah,
and maybe that's a credit to DiBiase. And the match includes one of my favorite lines in WWF history, which is the "win if you can, lose if you must, but always cheat." I always thought that was such a great Jesse heel line. The thing that always perplexes me is why Gorilla calls him Brutai, and I don't know, is it like when
singular?
Like when a cactus is singular, it's cacti. So if he's a Brutus singular, is he Brutai?
He's just a Brutai.
I never could figure that out.
Brother Brutai, yeah.
Because he says it all the time. I mean,
Always.
he'll say that more than Brutus, yeah.
Yeah.
And then Jesse calls him Beefer.
Danny, I know you're a big Brutus fan too. Like, he was always a good mid-card act. He's Hulk's buddy, and actually, he kind of, following this pay-per-view, he actually gets elevated to the main event when he teams up with Hogan against Zeus and the Macho Man in a couple different spots, and Ted DiBiase and Zeus moving forward. So Brutus with another pretty good job. Like, he doesn't have a lot of swings and misses either on these big shows. He always puts in a pretty good, like, you're gonna get like a double from Brutus. You know what you're gonna get.
I think this was about as good as you could have hoped for from Brutus Beefcake, and being in there with DiBiase helped. Double count out didn't do anything for me in this match either. And it feels like I could be making this up. It felt like there were a lot of non-finishes on this show.
No, there were,
which I think hurt it a bit. But this was a perfectly good 10 minutes that on a shorter show would have probably left a better impression.
So, couple things throughout the show.
Theoretically, WrestleMania is supposed to tie up a lot of storylines.
It is.
Right?
It's supposed to be like the ending, like the culmination, which is kind of funny because I'm actually going to pitch when we get to the main event that and Dave Meltzer kind of talks a little bit about this too, that the main event and like this feud with Hogan Savage might have been better served if Savage held on for the title for a little while longer and Hogan chased him a little longer, because these guys were doing really good stuff at the house shows and Savage was really hot still. And then once he beat Savage, there's just, like we said, they brought Zeus in. They just don't have any like heels lined up against Hogan. That's kind of what did Warrior in, following too, because they just didn't really have strong heels lined up. So we'll get there a little while when we get to that main event match, but
they also had a movie to promote, Gino.
Yeah, No Holds Barred. We can't forget that one, which we get a preview of a little later on. Maybe one day we'll have to do a rewatch of that one and break that movie down. But
you're gonna have to get another host for that.
Yeah.
So
Trump is there. DiBiase mentions Trump, mentions the elite are there to watch him. He talks trash to Brutus. He calls himself the best athlete in the WWF. And then when he heads to ringside, he shakes Trump's hand, and Fink introduces the man who makes his spring residence in Palm Beach, Florida. That's where he is this part of the year. Gorilla asks, who did he beat to become the $1 Million Champ? And Jesse says, he had to beat somebody to get all that money. He beat the bank.
That's how fortunes are accrued, Monsoon. All the great fortunes were accrued through cheating.
So we get the huge pop for Brutus, the sleeper versus the $1 Million Dream. And then we got some, throughout the show, we got a lot of references to Gorilla's gambling. This is where it starts. So Jesse starts making fun of his gambling, says, Gorilla, what, you would go through the worth of that $1 Million belt in under 3 hours at the casino. He says he hears every time Gorilla goes home, he's minus everything but his underwear. And then Gorilla says he's been listening to the Weasel too much. Fast start for Beefcake, big back body drop. Ted's outside. It's all Brutus early, and then DiBiase turns the table, slows it down a little bit. So yeah, pretty good back and forth. You get some Virgil distracting in there, and ends up with a double count out. But the crowd loves the post-match beatdown on Virgil. Brutus gets the clippers out, and Jesse says, this should be a fine and a suspension. And Gorilla says the match is over. And Jesse says, then it's assault with a deadly weapon. And Gorilla
I also love what he said. I love what he says. How's he going to cut Virgil's hair?
Yeah. He says he just wants to give the guy a haircut. So, that was, that's fun. Like, you know what you're going to get with Brutus. You're going to get that tease of the Clippers. The crowd loves it. And this was fine. Like, this is a fine, 12, the match is 10 minutes plus the 2 or 3 minutes around. It's fine, 12 or 13 minutes. Then we get to the poor bushwhackers here, where, how'd you like to be licked by a bushwhacker nowadays, right? Right, fellas? In this climate?
They do nothing for me on any level
Ever.
Of wrestling, comedy, entertainment. I do the walk sometimes, but that's about it.
When you were 10 years old, though, Jason, not even then?
No, I would walk around and do the bushwhacker walk like a crazy person. Yeah,
and that's who they were meant for. Like, well, looking at it back now, who are these idiots? But 1989, I had no better tag team than the Bushwhackers.
So it's the Bushwhackers. They're at the brunch, and they're getting asked questions by Lord Alfred, and they don't answer any of them. They just eat. Poor Lord Alfred. He can just, sometimes he gets stuck in his words, and you could tell that he's not the most eloquent person, and he just is frozen, and he says something that's that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. That sentence he just said, it's what? But he's always fun to show up here and there, and we see Lord Alfred for a minute. Then we get the Bushwhackers versus the fabulous Rougeau brothers, the future Mountie Jacques Rougeau here, and he was also in the Quebecers later on in his career. Crowd, as Danny said, they pop for the Bushwhackers, and Jesse said he saw Gorilla walking through the casino like the Bushwhackers, and Gorilla says, sometimes it happens. And Jesse says, he asks if he was hitting the joy juice, and then he says, watch out, Gorilla, because you know what it does to animals. And he says the Bushwhackers look like they're on the joy juice or some kind of juice. And then most of all my notes are not about anything in this match. It's just about how Jesse and Gorilla start arguing about the Rougeaus and if they're real Americans because they reside in America now.
Yeah.
And they're really arguing about it back and forth. And doesn't it seem like Jesse almost always gets the better of Gorilla? It's like when you hear him now, and like Gorilla's just like painted himself into a corner, and he's just like, ah, crap. Like he can't say anything, and Jesse's just kind of laughing about it. And then this is where Gorilla keeps mentioning back in Jesse's day, and Jesse's getting riled up about it. Jesse even confuses Luke and Bush at one time. Bushwhackers get the W with the battering ram, then the double stomach breaker. Jesse calls it a major upset. Bushwhackers win, and they lick each other's faces. And then as they walk down the aisle, Sean Mooney is about to interview fans, and the Bushwhackers lick his face. Nice.
Well, there's a great line where Jesse says he's never seen the Bushwhackers do a wrestling move, and then when they do that battering ram and the double stomach breaker, which looks like the least painful move anybody's ever had done. Yeah, my other note is I love how Gorilla always says Raymond. Yeah, for Raymond Rougeau, who by the way went on to have like a very nice career, and I think maybe still is employed as a French commentator. I know he was gone for a while, but I think he came back.
Mm-hmm.
So shout out Raymond. And Jocks, I mean, like you said, he had a big career too. So, and I guess they don't talk. I saw some shoot interview where the brothers don't talk.
Danny K, you were a Bushwhacker guy, right? Yeah.
Bushwhacker guy, but it cracks me up that their music is the All American Boys.
We're All American Boy.
couple of French Canadians now residing. Where was it? Memphis.
Well, yeah, because there's that where Jesse talks about why is everybody always picking on poor Jimmy Hart. And because Jimmy was a Memphis guy, so and that's where Honky was at, and the Rougeau. To come to think of it, I used to love the Mounties song too. I mean, they're All American Boys and the Mounties song are horrible like singing efforts, but they're funny.
And then they changed when the Quebecers came on. The song was just "We're the Mounties." Yeah. All they did was just add the "We're" to the "I'm the Mountie" song.
Yeah.
And then the Mounties actually complained to Vince, and they changed the lyrics to "We're not the Mounties."
Yes. This is just so funny. And actually doing some research because the next show that I do later this week with Andrew and Darren is going to be Royal Rumble 92, and that's a big one for the Mountie. He had just won the IC title, and he's a. Is
that where he went to jail?
No, well, this is the one that he loses it to Piper. SummerSlam 91 we just did when he went to jail, which was amazing, and he's just screaming, "Ow, you're hurting me! You're hurting me!"
That was actually a really great bit.
It was funny.
It was gold.
Yeah. It was really good. SummerSlam 91 is an excellent one to go back and watch. Kind of some really good sneaky hidden gems in there too. So so far. The show's like the one thing I like about this is that it's moving pretty quick. There's not been like a lot of fluff and stuff in between yet. I say yet because things changed quite a bit when we have a couple segments coming up. But this next match is a hell of a lot of fun for a match that goes 5 minutes and 30 seconds. And I think that's the thing. Like when you get these two guys in the ring, Mr. Perfect and the Blue Blazer, they don't know who the Blue Blazer is. We know it's Owen Hart. These guys are excellent. I mean, if you were to make a list of like some of the all-time best workers in the WWF, these two would probably be in your top 10 for sure. And I think you just don't get really bad matches with either of these two guys. So it's Mr. Perfect versus the Blue Blazer. We got the new outfit, new singlet for Mr. Perfect, the Blazer from Parts Unknown. And Jesse calls it right away. He says it's going to be a sleeper match. And they give a shout out to Mr. Perfect's dad, Larry the Axe Hennig. Nobody knows.
24-inch neck.
Yeah, he was a AWA, right? Yeah, and they get started. The Blazer is controlling things early. He's flying around the ring. He's countering everything that Perfect tries. He goes to the top rope for a splash. Perfect gets his knees up, bounces around the ring, and then Perfect is in charge. Gorilla says he's glad he's retired, and so Jesse says, "Me too." And then he says, I got to say hi to Terry, Tyrell, Jade, and Jeremiah, my 4 biggest fans. And
who's Jeremiah? He got added in. Is that like Jade's husband or something?
It's got to be, right? Yeah, because it used to be just Terry, Tyrell, and Jade. And then Gorilla says, those are only 4 fans. And then Jesse teases a surprise. Gorilla isn't sure if he wants a surprise from Jesse. We get a cool belly-to-belly from Owen, the Blazer, and a couple real, near falls at the end. The crowd really bites on that. Perfect just gets out. Owen starts to argue with the ref about the 3 count, and then the Perfect gets the advantage, and he's able to hit the
the fisherman suplex. No, that's the perfect plex for the win.
I was thinking, I know that mask wrestling has like a great history in many places in the world. I always felt like it was hard to relate to someone when they were in the mask. Like
100%.
I didn't connect to them, and it almost makes me like that much more appreciative of Rey Mysterio because he was able to be huge with the mask, and I know that that's kind of a cultural thing too. But like Owen is awesome, and Owen is the Blue Blazers. Like, wow, this guy's good, but like, why do I care about a guy that I don't know about? And so. I don't
get
know.
the Weasley part because like some of the best things of Owen are like the Weasley heel stuff, right? And his like laughs or his his like the way he plays off the crowd too. He does a really good job with that. And you don't get that. Even as a babyface, he's fine, and you're able to get more emotion from him. I completely agree with you, especially young as a kid. Like I couldn't really connect as much. I needed the storyline a little bit more, like to get into a match. Nowadays I can appreciate just a really good worked match, Danny, but I still want some storyline in my wrestling. I think JR says it best. It's like you want some personal feuds, and then you end them in a ring with a good brawl. And this was fun, Danny. We got to see two excellent workers on the Mania stage.
No, a heck of a fun match, and just glimpses of things that were way ahead of their time with what Owen was doing back then. For me, it's tougher to watch the Blue Blazer character knowing what come of that, and that's just a real damper on it for me because before that I always remember kind of liking the Blue Blazer a bit as a kid.
Yeah,
but I mean, I obviously still do, but no, Owen would go on to much bigger and better things.
And I believe there's a Dark Side of the Ring on Owen. We're recording this on Tuesday night. I believe it's tonight. The final Dark Side of the Ring. It's going to be on Owen. It's supposed to be excellent.
I saw tonight, right? there was a news story about I get Brett saying Owen's wife's like diminishing his legacy or something. Because
she won't let him go into the WWF Hall of Fame. They've been wanting to induct him into the Hall of Fame now for a while, and she won't let it happen. She just is. Obviously, she doesn't like WWF for what went down, and she thinks that it's not. She even said like it's not
they got
real.
Paid, right? I mean, she got a big lawsuit.
Yeah. So I think she still she makes the decisions there. So that's kind of what it's all come down to. Eventually they'll love to get him in there, and be able to kind of pay a little tribute to him. But if she doesn't want it to happen, then it won't. And so we'll get a look at Owen. If you want to get some the Dark Side of the Ring, those series have been really, really good. They're so if you're like a happy-go-lucky wrestling fan, they're not for you because they're going to give you the literal dark side of everything. But they're very, very fascinating.
I watch them every week.
Yeah, worth checking out. Excellent stuff. So Fink introduces an all-time star, one of television's top commentators, and a self-professed major Hollywood star, Jesse the Body. And we get the big reaction for Jesse. He did this at most shows, and you know what? The crowd loved him. He had been in movies now. He was a constant for many years on the announce table, and he was, I think, one of the first, like him and Piper are kind of in that wave of like the cool heels. The heels that it's okay to like kind of guys,
Well, Jesse kind of he had those. There were some wrestlers who, whether they were heel or face, like Macho, and he liked no matter what. And like Rude was one that he always, I thought, overly pushed to liking, which I like because I liked Rude. But it's interesting. I also thought Jesse played favorites a little bit. I mean, of course, he's the heel announcer, but there was some he was way more passionate about than others. And yeah, he definitely. I think you're right about the crossover heel thing because there was a long time where like it was just like robots, good guy, bad guy, that's it.
Danny K, what are your like some of your overall Jesse thoughts?
No, he just exuded coolness, and just he also was pointing out things that were so obvious all the time. If you actually just looked at them, like this guy is Hogan's cheating just as much.
Yeah, no, you're right. He was right. He was just right a lot.
And every time you stop and think about it, like, hey, I'm supposed to not like Jesse, but everything he's saying is pretty much true.
Yeah, exactly. Like he was just sharp, and with him and Bobby, they were too quick with things to where it wasn't like they didn't have a list of canned things. Like they didn't have like the the button to press for like, like this next, sound bite. They were just what you said. They were going to process it and then respond to it just quicker than you could. And they could just do that with Gorilla all the time, or Vince or whoever they were with. And just really smart, sharp guys. I love listening back to all these Jesse stuff and Bobby when they're on, and we get the big pop for Jesse. And then we see the 5K run from earlier. This is like one of those weird things that I remember from this WrestleMania, and it's such a small thing, but like Mr. Fuji doing the 5K run in his full suit, and obviously like having cheated because he just shows up like no sweat. He's with the top, but he's been running slow every time we've seen him. Like how everybody's just passing him. How is he, up there with the best? This is great. This is funny. Fuji finishes the 5K. Yeah, they finished the 5K in under 20 minutes with his damn cane. That's impressive, Jason.
I put down that I think he really did complete the 5K because I think he shows a little athleticism in the show and in that match, and I think that he tuned up for it properly.
Fuji's a 5-time tag team champion. That was something I didn't realize until it said like multiple time tag team champion, and I wanted to go back and look, and then I realized like, oh crap, he held the tag team champions 5 times, I think, with 3 different partners. So he was definitely somebody who I like Mr. Fuji. Like, Danny, the one thing I sort of miss nowadays, and we're kind of getting it, like we get Zelina Vega, who's actually a pretty good mouthpiece, and she's kind of a good heel, and she's kind of getting like a heel faction now. But when we watch these old shows, it was so easy to know somebody was like a good guy or a bad guy based on who they were with, right? It's like, you're with Slick, you're with Jimmy, you're with Bobby the Brain, you're a bad guy.
Not only is it instant affiliation, like, are you a face or are you a heel? Oh, Heenan family, obviously you're a bad guy. It's built-in storylines. It's one of the best mouthpieces in the business, and they had several at the time who were great.
Have you guys? Go ahead. Sorry, Danny.
No, go ahead, Jim.
Well, I was going to ask you, have you guys ever seen the video of Macho's first match with WWF?
I don't think so.
It's on YouTube. You can find it, or you can find it on the network.
Managers or
all the managers
are
out.
Okay, yeah.
All the managers are at ringside, and they're all sizing him up. And then after the match, they all go up in there, and they're all taking a look. And it's just such a funny bit to me because I think it's all the bad guy managers.
Yeah,
I mean, was there good guy managers really? I mean, other than Elizabeth certainly was, but it seemed like I guess Oliver Humperdinck became one when Bam Bam.
He was like,
it kind of just depended on their character, but it always seemed like managers mostly were heels.
Yeah, and I think because they give you a little added something, they can help you cheat, and then they can take the heat after the match, right? Like Bobby can take a bump, or Jimmy Hart or Slick's gonna get his suit ripped off, like, so you can. It's a fun way to use the manager as a heel, and I think now I wish we had a few more of them. There's some really good talkers with personalities. It actually looks like MVP is going to be like speaking sort of for Lashley, which I kind of like because, Bobby Lashley's a big, good looking guy, but he just can't speak. He doesn't have very much personality. He doesn't get across. So that's what these guys could do, is that they could make wrestlers that we wouldn't have really taken seriously or wouldn't have thinking much of them. But then you put them in the Heenan family, and now all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, this guy's a bad guy and they're kind of a contender. So I miss a lot of the managers as we get to this was the Run DMC concert. I'm not gonna really talk about that. I love what Gorilla says after though. Jesse, I know you liked that, but a little bit of that goes a long way with me. Just like ripping on this right away. Like, sorry, I'm old. No, thank you. I don't need this concert in my wrestling ring. And I'm never really a fan. Like, I'm fine when they have bands playing like an entrance song, someone to the ring. I just like, maybe give it to me before the show or after the show. I think a lot of times when your wrestling fans are there, it really kind of brings the crowd down when you have
music and sports just don't mix to me. I've never understood why everybody wants to horn them in. Yeah. You're always going to have half the crowd that hates the artist or is just annoyed, and it's just I never have understood the connection.
And you love music and you love sports. Exactly. It's not like you don't like either. I love them both too.
I love barbecue and I love cereal, Gino, but I don't want them together.
But to Gino's point, though, when you actually get the band playing the theme song down,
that's
always money. Works every.
That's great for me. That's fine. I love that. But just a little bit out of place sometimes. But this was a big get. I mean, Run DMC was big. You know, they're big stars here. We get the footage for the Demolition versus the Powers of Pain match coming up, and we get this goes all the way back to Survivor Series when Mr. Fuji turned on Demolition in that double turn. We get a Demolition promo where I think they say your favorite right here, what they call Fuge. How many times do they say it in this promo, Fuge, Jason? Maybe 5?
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened was they're sitting back, you know, they're on the road, they're traveling the circuit, and Axe is just like, hey, Smash, what about calling him Fuge Stooge? And they're just like, it's genius, Axe. And then they just decided to just bury it into the ground by saying it 20 times. And you could just tell they fell in love with that term. Fuge Stooge.
So this is the first time the tag team titles have ever been defended in a 3-on-2 match. And Fuji is wrestling with the Powers of Pain, Warlord and the Barbarian. And Gorilla calls them a mongrel team, which I just love too. Right off the bat. Demolition's all over them early. Gorilla wonders if the Powers of Pain are overwhelmed by the big stage of WrestleMania. He says it happened to him his first time at Madison.
He pitched that a couple times during the
show. Yeah,
which
I kind of like. It's a little something different, you know. It's like, okay, it feels a little real. I just love the banter. Like I said, it's something like this, or the way they talk about the bear hug, or just things that we don't really hear the announcers say a whole lot nowadays. So it's good to me. It just kind of gives you that little bit more real feel. Jesse said, it happened more than once from what I hear, Gorilla. And Gorilla said that he got nervous at Madison Square Garden his first time. So Fuji comes in. They have the advantage. That's when he comes in. You know, he'll do things like 1 or 2 little moves, then get out of the ring. Warlord is holding Smash, and then Fuji goes to throw salt in his eyes, and you know what happens when somebody gets some salt in their eyes. Yeah, Smash is done. He is done, Beam, and he moves. It nails Warlord. He's knocked out forever. So Warlord's done. Smash was the one who moved out of the way. Demolition double teams Fuji. They get the win. Pretty standard. I mean, Demolition was in charge for most of this. It really, I guess, wasn't even as competitive as I kind of remember it being.
Warlord and Barbarian got to be on the list of like most jacked tag team of all time, right? Those guys are monsters
at this time too.
Warlord, I don't think could lift his arm over parallel. Like his shoulders are too buff.
We got the Barbarian Danny, who would later become, I think, even Sione later at one time. He went and had a main event title match in WCW with Ron Simmons. Warlord had a decent feud with the Bulldog a couple years from now, but I don't know. Like I always wanted to like this team a little bit more, but they just didn't really do it for me. Powers of Pain. Demolition, on the other hand, they were awesome.
Demolition, some of the all-time greats. Powers of the Pain looked great, but I think they were better apart, honestly. And you remember speaking of managers, when these two broke up, it wasn't like they fought or anything. It's just, I think Bobby Heenan kept one, and was it Slick took the Warlord? It's like we sold new contracts. We're new guys managing them now.
So Demolition, still your champs here. We get to Tony Schiavone. He's backstage. Macho Man's in his locker room. And Macho Man, I forgot how good he was in this show. I mean, even these little parts when they go back to him, and he's like crazy going around his locker room, like running around just screaming to himself, no, I'm not going to talk to you. It was Elizabeth Hogan. Like, he's just going ballistic. It is awesome. He's just such an incredible performer. And Tony tries to go in. Macho shoots him down. Up next, we get a match that...
Oh, cool. Gino, can I say something about Macho real quick?
Please do.
I feel like, you know how a horse runs off in post-parade? They left their race on the warm-up track. That was Macho. Like, if he was pacing around like that for 3 hours before that show, I mean, how is he not had a... He was way too intense for... I mean, Jake the Snake before shows, we're getting ready for the... he's doing this. He's doing it right. I think Macho ran his race before he got into the ring.
A little washed out when he got there, yeah. So Macho in his big night. We'll see him in a bit in the main event. Dino Bravo with Frenchie Martin versus Rugged Ronnie Garvin, who was the former NWA champion. Yes, Rugged Ronnie Garvin, who beat Ric Flair for the NWA title. He And this was weird too because they announced Superfly before their match.
That was the strangest thing of the whole show.
So
and this
weird,
is a show
right?
loaded with strange things.
Right? I mean, just like if you're gonna bring him out and wave to the crowd or something, that's fine. But like, why? Like in the middle of the match, it was almost like they're like.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say maybe they were thinking they were gonna ignite a feud with Bravo or something. I don't know, but it felt really out of place.
And
I was thinking maybe they thought it was just the worst match on the card, so let's give it something to at least to do.
Yeah, plus, enough going on this show already. Is Superfly really going to get a pop in front of a papered crowd at a casino?
Good point too. This is probably not the best spot to bring him back to get the kind of reaction that you want for him, because that's what we see with the crowd. They're hot for just the major babyface spots. This isn't like a smart crowd or a sharp crowd or a crowd who probably would have been really hot to see Jimmy Snuka come back. So, I mean, these two guys are all punches, chops, power moves. Jesse and Gorilla start to argue about Dino Bravo and his limitations on his strength. It's unlimited, Gorilla. Well, no, it's not. Nobody has unlimited strength. It's unlimited, Gorilla. Back and forth. And then Dino hits a side suplex. He gets a quick win. It's 3 minutes. Garvin attacks Dino in Frenchie post-match. He gets the Garvin stomp in. But this was like another one, Jason, where it's like, if you give me a couple more minutes in the Twin Towers match. You know what I mean? Like with the Rock.
The only, as you said, Jesse is one of the stars of this thing, and when he starts talking about his earrings being made of diamonds and stones, and like to me, that's the best. That's the thing I remember about this match is like Jesse just having funny lines about Gorilla. My earrings are made of diamonds and stones. Why? I'd be an idiot to throw them out the people or whatever.
So, Danny, what'd you think here?
No, I thought a couple of guys I wasn't too into at any point ever. So
me too. Yeah, me too. We don't have to spend more time on it than that. And you get these little small runs you forget about with the Brainbusters, like Arn Henderson and Tully Blanchard here in the WWF for their little run they had, and they're with Bobby the Brain, and they're against Strike Force. And this is the newly reunited Strike Force with Tito Santana and Rick Martel. The only thing that bummed me out about this match is we didn't get a whole lot of Chico. We got the Chicos, but we didn't get really like any of the Mexican, or like go to Mexico references. Not a whole lot. But I think that's more because they were telling the story of this is where Rick Martel becomes the model. He turns, and after this, he's going to be the model Rick Martel. But this is good. This is a good tag match. You have four guys that are really solid workers. Martel gets the Boston Crab in early, and then both guys, Martel and Tito, they lock in figure fours on Arn and Tully, and then Arn uses the eye poke a couple different times. Tito goes for the flying forearm. Tully ducks, and then that's when Tito nails Martel, and that's basically what gets this team to break up. Martel says, afterwards he'd been carrying Tito and this and that. So it's basically Tito getting his butt kicked for the majority of this match. Hot tags in and out from the other side, and Chico crawls over to Martel, who's a little shaken up, but he refuses the tag. He throws his hands at Tito, and he walks away. A few more minutes of back and forth. They hit this double team spiked pile driver for the win that looked rough, and that's the match: Brainbusters versus the Strike Force.
Yeah, and the spike pile driver looked like a murder, death, kill type finisher back in that era.
Oh,
there's no coming back from that. And I mean, this is one half of the Four Horsemen, the Brainbusters, and I don't know if you were an NWA guy back in the 80s, either of you, but I didn't know who these guys were, but later on I would kind of realize, wow, these guys did a year in the WWF.
I remember thinking they were like just old guys that I didn't know about, and I remember being kind of annoyed by it. The thing about this match is actually the post match for me is Mean Gene gets like real indignant and mad at Martel instead of just being be a journalist. Mean Gene, like don't ask the question, give the man a chance to respond. But Mean Gene gets mad at him.
He's mad. He's pissed.
Yeah.
He says. Rick is sick and tired of Tito. He doesn't want to be associated with that loser Tito anymore, and he mentions his timing was way off. And Mean Gene says, "You were supposed to be a team, damn it!" He even says "damn it," I think, and he
gets real mad.
Yeah, he's not Bobby the Brain in the broadcast journalism. Let's be honest.
No, Broadcast journalist. I use that every once in a while. I'll say I'm a broadcast journalist, for God's sake.
Which, I mean, because I'm doing 92 Rumble also right now, preparing for that one. So just getting the array of stuff from Bobby and the Flair stuff there is absolutely incredible. But the model's born. So then after this, I mean, Tito and Martel have feuds for like the next 3 or 4 years, really, like almost as long as they're both in WWF. It's like a go-to match that they could just throw on Raw sometime, or a Superstars, and whenever they need to fill a little time. And then we can spend the least amount of time as this on possible. I just want to mention some of the specifics. So this is the Piper Pit segment. Brother Love comes out to mock Piper's Pit. He pretends to be rowdy. He interviews himself. And then Morton Downey Jr. comes out smoking. He's doing his shtick. He's a famous like DJ, and he's got a show where he would just be a dick to people, basically. He would bring people on his show. He'd try to get them to like fight with each other. He'd try to rile them up, and then he'd blow smoke in their face. And he was kind of like anti-authority guy, in the late 80s. And his big shtick was blowing smoke in people's faces. So it takes 7 minutes for the two of them before Piper even comes out. And the 7 minutes feels like it's 15 to 20. Then Piper comes out. He's actually asking Brother Love questions and doing the old Piper thing where he's cutting him off before he can answer. After 7 more minutes of Piper and Love going back and forth, Piper rips off Brother Love's kilt, and then he Brother Love's in his undies, and he runs down. And then Downey Jr. blows smoke in Piper's face. Piper asks him not to. He calls him Morticia. Even like the Piper stuff isn't good. It's not funny. It's not creative. It's not sharp. And it was 20 minutes from the Piper douses him with the fire extinguisher when he ends up blowing smoke in his face. It's such a waste of time. From the intro to the end of this segment, it is over 23 minutes long.
It's 10% of the show.
It's just
crazy to think about that.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Danny, have you watched this? The same thing with like the Run DMC. Is this one of those things that you've like never watched again since the first time you unfortunately had to sit through it?
All right, now you're going to get a contrarian opinion from me on this one.
Hot take.
I agree that it went on way too long. Granted on that. However, I watched Morton Downey Jr. in the 80s, got a huge kick out of him. Brother Love, one of my favorite characters of all time, and Roddy Piper, one of the best. I don't hate this. I get a kick out of the segment every time.
That's loving it.
Maybe it's an age thing. It's a generational thing.
I love you, Danny. And
this is a kilt. That's a skirt. Yeah, I get a kick out of this. So sue me.
The one thing that when we were talking about like sad stuff, when you look back at some of these things, so Morton Downey Jr. died of lung cancer.
Yeah, and his thing was
the smoke.
A lot of he just would smoke incessantly, blow smoke in people's faces. Got diagnosed with lung cancer, and he did a 180. I know the last few years of his life, he was a
spokesperson against it. Yeah. So It's just what a crazy, weird, like messed up bit of irony in that, like the thing that is your gimmick forever. And I'm saying that we are stupid at this point, but like we didn't know like what we know about smoking now. In the late 80s. I mean, my grandma walked around my house smoking a lot when I was a kid, and it wasn't thought of that big of a deal. And things really changed on that, like into the early 90s and moving forward. But yeah, just sad. And another one of those, like, we like it or not, you definitely will remember this damn segment. And we got to see Piper again, and we get to go from Piper to Jake the Snake. First, we get Mean Gene backstage. Can't forget this. So a couple things first before we get there. So Mean Gene's backstage with a sneak preview of No Holds Bars, starring Hulk Hogan as Rip. Danny, this movie, I'm gonna get to you first, Danny. This movie is one of those weird ones where it's so bad, it's actually had like a cult following over the last like decade or so, because it's so bad people just love watching it to just point out how atrocious it is with Rip. And they basically had this storyline come to life. But you know what? If you're going to give me a wrestling movie, you're going to give me Hulk Hogan as a kid. I watched this damn movie so many times over and over and over.
Me too. And kind of loved it at the time. And the irony is, turned out to be the best of the Hulk Hogan stars.
It really did.
By a country mile.
Yeah.
And did Vince kind of invent the UFC in this movie?
Seriously,
guys.
And Vince put a lot of money into this as well. And Jason, I mean, this was, I think, the first of, actually, I guess the second. He'd been in Rocky 3 prior to this, but then you got, Mr. Nanny, Santa with Muscles, Suburban Commando after this. Some real classics from Hulk. He's definitely not The Rock when you compare IMDb's.
Don't forget Tropical, something in Paradise?
Thunder in Paradise.
That was a show, though.
I mean, there was a movie, and then the show, it got expanded into the show on TNT, because that, when he went over and started with WCW, when he was doing that show for them. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. See, I watched the movie we're talking about, No Holds Barred, but I think I watched it, when I was 10, and that was about it. So I really don't I have vague memories of Zeus, but that's about it.
So we get to Sean Mooney with Donald Trump. They talk about what brought Mania to the city. They mention gambling. And then they get back to Jesse. And Jesse is pissed. He is freaking pissed. Hulk Hogan, you are stepping into my territory. And he's pissed that Hogan's in a movie. I mean, he is furious here. And then you could tell I don't know obviously this was something he was supposed to do and he was into it, but the whole rest of the show, he makes like 3 or 4 more references. And then even after the main event, he starts talking about how he has to come back in. So this ruffled some Jesse feathers, Jason.
Yeah. I want to go back to the Mooney and Trump.
Yes.
Mooney seems really nervous in this interview. And he's kind of stammering a little bit, and he's usually fine. I mean, to me, he was kind of that perfect interviewer type that you just don't notice at all. And in this spot, I remember he seemed really nervous. I mean, he wasn't the president then, so I mean, he's just a rich guy, but he legit seems washed out about it. Yeah.
Anything that sparks your fancy about these few things, Danny?
No, I don't think I necessarily got what Jason got there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We get to some footage of the Mega Powers build-up. We got a lot of their matches together, Saturday Night's Main Event, Survivor Series stuff, Savage turning on Hulk after Hulk carries Elizabeth out, and then Hulk cuts a promo with Mean Gene. And he sort of takes a little dig at Macho early saying, when they were running together, the Mania was ahead of the madness. And then he really navigates through their whole story. And at one point he goes to do his brother and he says mother on accident, and he has to catch himself, mother, brother. And he says, and then he really goes off. He loves talking about these weird foundation of the building with Donald Trump. And remember the year before, he's doing the paddle back. Yeah. And this one isn't quite as memorable, but he's definitely getting into some weird foundation of the building stuff and Trump. But I guess it's a pretty standard Hogan promo.
Yeah. I kept waiting for him to do the back pedal.
Me too. I would have done
That's my favorite line from that one.
Off the camera, right off the screen. That's amazing. And then we get Andre versus Jake with Big John Studd as a special guest ref. And Andre looks massive, poor guy. And he's so hunched over. And I believe this is the last time we see him in a singles capacity. I think after this, it's all tag teams and then Colossal. Yeah, I think the Survivor Series tag team and then Colossal Connection with Haku, and then maybe just showing up to wave here and there.
Which was a Haku solo team, basically.
He doesn't even get out of the ring in that one match in Mania 6. Literally, he doesn't. Andre never even tags in. I had forgot about that until doing the rewatch, and I gotta say, knowing what we know about the where Andre was physically in this match, he does an amazing job getting through about 10 minutes. And as a kid, we not knowing that Andre is not going to be around very much longer, he really does. He's doing the Andre stuff, he's a lot of the hits, the chaps, the punt, the pokes, and he's, nothing really wrestling wise at all. He can't really get off the ground, he can't really get knocked down and get back up here. But this was okay to me. Actually, a couple things I pointed out too. when Andre came out, the crowd was pretty silent. I
No
still
music either, right?
Yeah, and I don't think they liked booing Andre a whole lot. It was weird because this guy was like an attraction for so long, and this crowd, I don't think they knew what to do really with Andre.
I think it's easier to boo him against a guy like Hogan than a guy like Jake the Snake also.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, like Hogan, you're going to boo kind of whoever's the anti-Hogan. But with Jake, he's kind of a bad guy a little in himself. And when Big John Studd comes out, I love the discussion that Gorilla and Jesse were having. They talk about where these guys have to go to get weighed, and Gorilla says he used to have to go to the truck stops. Andre attacks Jake immediately. They had the turnbuckle pad removed, which was cool. Because it's like you got a special guest ref who's not going to check for that thing. So immediately they slam Jake into the exposed steel, and Andre's got the advantage early. He's got his hits, his chokes, his strikes, a little small flurry from Jake. Andre, like always, gets the tied up in the rope spot where Jake kind of chokes him out, and in the crowd, like anytime Jake goes to tease for that snake. And I mean this in a PG sense, so get your minds out of the gutters, folks. The crowd goes insane, and Andre gets untied. He's back in charge. Jake turns it around. So this is decent back and forth. He puts Andre into the exposed turnbuckle, and then Jake gets knocked outside. Andre and Studd start to get into it, and Jake gets the snake. And then from behind, the $1 Million Man comes out. He takes the snake from Jake. He runs down the aisle. So what I loved about this, too, is we knew that the $1 Million Man and Andre have a past. We know that, and then this kind of sparks a $1 Million Man Jake feud here moving forward. So this did a lot of good things to kind of keep stories moving forward. And the one thing I love, too, so Jake wins by DQ while Andre's choking Big John Studd. And, Jake gets the snake back. He comes back in, he staves John Studd. And then Jesse asks, why did he get DQ'd while Andre's choking the referee out? It was just like, really? Andre, Jake with Big John Studd in here, who Andre had the built-in feud with. I thought this could have been a lot worse than it was, Jason.
Yeah, no, it was entertaining, and they kind of put Studd over quite a bit. How big he is and how strong he is and all that kind of stuff. So I think it was kind of fun for him, and he's another one that didn't live much longer past this, right?
No.
Yeah, and so I wonder if it was a little bit of that, like, hey, let's just give this guy who was kind of an attraction for us a little bit of a bone here. I don't know if they knew he was sick or whatnot, but I thought it was fun. It was at least something a little bit unique in a card of where there was a lot of ununique.
Yeah, and seeing Andre, no matter what state he was in, it's always an attraction. He's always one of the Mount Rushmore pro wrestling guys, and yeah.
And his whole ending is so sad too that now you look back and it's like, oh, Andre.
And what I kind of like them knowing this, it adds a little bit to this match when I watch it. Andre hated Big John Studd in real life. He hated anybody else who was considered a giant or any of the other big guys because he was the giant. He did not like you. He loved working with the small guys. Just what you had said kind of at the beginning, Jason.
He hated Macho, right?
He didn't love Macho. Yeah. He did not. He loved Brett. He loved working with Brett. Or no. He didn't like Macho as much. He really didn't like the Warrior. That was the one. Right. I think he was okay with Macho, but he hated the Warrior. I think what he didn't like with Macho was the Liz stuff because he was friends with Liz. He kind of befriended her, and he didn't like the way Macho would treat Liz a little bit. But he would just go sour a lot of the times too. He was big. Things were hard for him. It was hard just getting around. He'd be not feeling good someday. His back was not going good, and then it'd be like, uh-oh. Hopefully Andre's gonna work with us here. And so when he's just choking Big John Studd, I'm like wondering sometimes how hard he was choking him there. Maybe there's a little bit extra there. I'm the big man, and poor Big John. So Sherry cuts a promo on Rockin' Robin's awful singing, and then Miss Elizabeth, and so we kind of get the little tease that we're going to see Sherry now in the future with the Macho Man. We end up seeing.
I was thinking there was going to be a women's match when she started talking about it, and then there's not. Yeah,
it would have made sense because Sherry was a former women's champ too, and so she's actually good in the ring. We see the way she bumps all over the place. She's excellent. We get a tag team match, Rhythm and Blues. They're not Rhythm and Blues yet. They don't mention that. Greg the Hammer and Honky Tonk versus the Hart Foundation. And you know what? This is a pretty good match. This is like Honky and Greg are good in a tag team, especially against like a babyface tag team like this. You got a quick start for the Hart Foundation. Hammer comes in. They talk about the fact that these two were both former IC title holders. And I think they got a good dig on Pat Patterson when Gorilla mentioned
what a relic he is.
Yeah. He was probably laughing backstage, and they were probably having fun with him. And hey, Jason, we talk about this a lot. Gorilla, he cut his time in half this time. He would always say that Greg the Hammer needed about 15 minutes to get warmed up. This time he said 7 or 8 minutes.
Well, he said it about Garvin earlier in the card.
Yeah, you're right.
I always think that's a fun drinking game. Is like take a shot whenever Gorilla mentions that Hammer takes a while to get warmed up, which is such a weird thing. Like in a cardiovascular kind of thing. Like. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I just go straight down. I don't warm up. I go, but no, I actually disagreed a little bit, Gino, in the sense that I didn't think Honky and Hammer were just all that interesting together, and especially the Rhythm and Blues thing. I thought was just
that was horrible,
corny. But I don't know, and maybe I hold that against them, but I did think of. I always wondered if either Gorilla stole it from Ed Burgard or Ed Burgard stole it from him, like getting stronger as the race gets longer. Like that's kind of what they're saying about Greg the Hammer, right? So maybe Eddie B's like a wrestling icon.
You don't appreciate it till you see Greg Valentine versus Bruno Sammartino, one of the 60-minute draws from the Boston Gardens.
Oh, I mean, that just sounds like hammer locks and arm bars for 20 minutes, yeah.
Magical elbows, though. You're going to get some of those magical elbows, too, with the Hammer. I think, I definitely didn't like them as rhythm, and they got into Rhythm and Blues. I think I just, in particular, this match surprised me in that it really wasn't bad. I kind of see Honky and Greg a little bit later and then figure that, okay, your work's not going to be that great. But I didn't mind this match. They worked on Brett for a while, and Gorilla, they talk about finishing moves because at one point Honky hits his little finisher, but he doesn't go for the pin.
Yeah.
And Jesse and Gorilla talk about it, and Gorilla they talk about Gorilla Splash, and Jesse says, "I need to be 72 to know about that." And then Gorilla says he's rapidly approaching. So there's more with that age stuff that they've been having fun with, but lots of the heels cheating that you would expect, and then it actually ends up working against them. The Anvil gets a hot tag. He's chasing Jimmy Hart around, who drops the megaphone. Anvil picks it up, tosses it to Brett. He nails Honky from the back for the win.
Did Brett ever get a hot tag? It always seems like Brett was always the one getting beat up.
Always the seller.
I have a greater appreciation for the Anvil since he passed away, and I don't mean that from a morbid sense, but Brett paid so much nice tribute to him after his passing, and and Brett obviously has such a high status that every time I see them together now, I smile a little bit more than I maybe used to, because I was always a Brett guy, not an Anvil guy.
No, Anvil came across also like this just freaking lunatic. Well, which in that role and juxtaposed against Brett, just that's part of what made the Hart Foundation so special.
Anvil's a perfect tag, he's just a perfect tag wrestler or a perfect part of a group, right? He would have been a lot less interesting on his own. Not less interesting, because he's kind of got a fun little he can cut a fun promo and he's got his fun laugh, but he just wouldn't have been able to get you 10 to 15 minutes by himself in the ring. Him coming in with that hot tag was perfect. You have the worker with Brett, they were such a great tag team together. And I agree. You even watch the Royal Rumble 92, which I'm looking at now, and he's in a match with the new Foundation with Owen Hart against the Orient Express to open the show, and it is
baggy pants.
Yeah, and it's damn good,
yeah.
And they really know how to sell for Jim. Every time he does the shoulder block, they go flying, and that's the match when Bobby's calling him nuts every 2 seconds. He's nuts. He's nuts. He's nuts. This guy is nuts. I think it was 7 when I was counting how many times he actually said nuts in that match. So love when I get to see the Hart Foundation on my TV here in we get to footage of the Warrior and Rude build up here. So it's Rick Rude versus the Ultimate Warrior for the Intercontinental Championship. This started back in, I think, the Royal Rumble when they had to pose off. And of course, whenever there's going to be some kind of a pose off or an arm wrestling contest or some contract signing, the heel is going to attack the babyface and have the advantage. So we set up Warrior Rude, and we get this is a pretty good Rude one. And one of the best parts about Rude is when he comes out and, in the entrance, what I'd like to have right now is all you Atlantic City sweat hogs to keep the noise down while I take my robe off and give the ladies a look at the sexiest man alive. We got some all-time great ones from Rude, Jason. He is awesome when he comes out and just insults them with like a weird insult.
He's a top guy for me, like ever. I just think he's so good. He just moves so well. He's one of those guys that, like, whenever he took a backdrop, like, he would just get extra high, and like just little stuff like that I used to, like Mr. Perfect, I think, is the best getting thrown out of the ring guy ever, because he kicks his feet up just a little extra and it just does something. And I love the tights. I mean, the whole thing with his tights when he had Jake's wife on the one time, but this time had the Intercontinental belt. I'm a huge Rick Rude guy from this era.
Danny, doesn't it feel like Rude feels to me like one of those guys that, like, they feel like they were around for longer than they were because we were young and everything was like, felt like bigger. But when you look back at the grand scheme of things, he really wasn't WWF for all that long, but he made a dent, and his best stuff was with the Warrior by far.
Danny's on mute.
Uh-oh.
Sorry about that.
There you go. No worries.
Rookie mistake here with a couple of pros, but
it's okay. Don't you worry.
Just saying. Rude always just brought it and made an impression, even on a chubby little 11-year-old or 10-year-old like me, whatever it was at the time I was watching, and here's this Adonis calling me out. I hate you, Rick Rude, but.
But he did his job.
He did it great, but I was absolutely flabbergasted that he could ever beat the Ultimate Warrior.
Me too.
And by the way,
the perfect interference with Bobby Heenan to pull it off.
Well, that final move, like, Rude about took a neck breaker on that.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a tough spot to do, right? You have to get up into the suplex, but then fall. Like, Rude ends up landing like straight on his head.
On his head, like it was almost like a DDT. Yeah, like a swinging DDT, because he had to go for the cover like immediately while Bobby was holding on the leg. So the finish is really sharp. And I mean, the one thing about like that when you hear people, they talk about the Warrior as a worker, and again, I mean, Jason, like, we're looking at the matches and the shows that we've talked about, like SummerSlam 92.
He's doing good stuff.
He's got a damn good match here again. Yeah. And, I mean, we got Rude with the belt airbrushed on the front of his tights, and then Warrior's face on his butt, which he always had the great tights airbrushed. Warrior with the sprint to the ring. And Warrior is just tossing him around early. And Jesse's worried because he's picked Rude, and he's worried. And then we get a poke in the eye from Rude, and a drop kick off the top rope, which was awesome. Like, really, really good to see from Rude how athletic he was. Then it started to really go back and forth, and the crowd chanting Weasel as they talk about how Bobby the Brain needs to get his gold. He wants to get a belt into the Heenan family. And then Jesse, like, this is something that you always point out too, Jason. When Morella's in there, that Jesse's going to rip on him. Every time.
He got him earlier in the night. I actually made a note about it somewhere, but I forgot what it was. But I always get a kick out of that now, because you obviously know it's Gorilla's son, and you don't know that. It was the Rockers Big Guys one. Jesse calls him in, and he goes, "That idiot Morella." It's like, and what I imagine is Vince telling Jesse to do that.
Yes.
And Gorilla just being like, "Vince, screw you,"
shaking his head like. Yeah. Vince, come on, man! But we always get that when Joey Morella's reffing one of the matches. So Warrior misses a splash, And this was great. Gorilla says he hit too many ropes and got confused, and Jesse says it doesn't take much to confuse the Warrior. And then Rude nails a pile driver. He has the advantage, and Warrior's noticeably, getting slower now, getting worn down. Not like bad in the match, but you could tell that it's taken him out. Rude's been working on him for a while. It's taken its toll. And Warrior goes for a suplex. He goes to suplex Rude from the outside of the ring. He's on the ring apron over the ropes inside. And while he does that, Bobby grabs his ankles, the Warrior's ankles, and it causes Warrior to fall and Rude to fall on top of him for the 1, 2, 3. I mean, we talked about it right at the beginning of the match. It looked good. It looked awesome. It was really smooth. Bobby's like leaning down, bending down, and holding on to the feet as hard as he can, like all of his might. And he is pumped afterwards. Bobby with the win. And
they make Bobby kind of one of the storylines, right?
Yes.
Like throughout the thing, will Bobby get which again, as a Rude fan, kind of annoyed me because it almost felt like he was becoming more like it was
Rude
more
about
winning
Bobby
the Continental title.
Yep.
Yeah, and which Bobby obviously deserves a lot of plaudits, but I don't know. Yeah, that part was a little bit, but I mean, I think that's why that's why they do that. The finished it how they did was because Bobby was supposed to be kind of the big thing, and maybe it was just a payoff for years and years of not winning them.
Danny, we said it, like we will look back. I feel like I should be seeing more bad Warrior matches. I haven't, like in the big moments, I haven't really seen a whole lot of them. He was good with Rude.
No, I'm a staunch Warrior defender. Not every guy is going to go out there and have what modern fans are going to consider a 4 or 5 star match every time. But you wrestle to what the occasion is or what the story is you're trying to tell. And on the big nights, Warrior, he had some great dance partners, but he delivered and
he pulled his weight. Yes,
if out there on Superstars or Saturday Night's Main Event. He doesn't have to do more than a 3-minute squash. That's what got him over.
I mean, Warrior continues to impress me on these rewatches each and every time. Another big match and a big moment where he really stepped up here. And, this is 1989. The next year is going to be the biggest moment of his career and a really, really good match again with Hulk Hogan in the main event. So great job by Warrior. Great job by Rude and Bobby with everything involved in this match here.
And what a different place the Warrior's in from WrestleMania 4 to 5. Same location, but like the makeup's better, the outfits are better. His pop is better. Everything is better. Like
he's
such a far cry from
better.
Where he was. Yeah, from just a year before. Yeah,
seeing people develop is another one of my favorite things that I've been kind of being able to see in these few. Like you see someone like the Warrior, and that Jason, what you just mentioned, it's almost as big as like when you look at The Rock from like 96 to 97. In one of those, you kind of see him go from, I think it's 97 to 98, where you see him go from, Rocky Maivia, good guy, in the IC title against the Sultan, and then 98, he's like talking trash to Jennifer Flowers,
Stone Cold too, right? Yeah. I mean, when he was just stunning Steve, he was no different than anybody, and then he was a world superstar.
Seeing the greats and how much they can do in just 1 year to the next, or one, a little bit of a time period. And, I'm really, really impressed again with the Warrior. We get to Bad News Brown versus Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And I liked both of these guys. I love Duggan. He has a great place, babyface guy, really, really cool. I just felt like a bad mismatch.
It's the classic. Okay, we got to get something. We got to cool the crowd down a little bit from the big inner IC to the title. I mean, it's the Bumblebees versus Nikolai and Sheik at WrestleMania.
Yep.
You're right. It's that in between, get us to the finals thing. We got to set up the crowd a little bit.
It's a double DQ, Danny, where Bad News, he teases walking out a few times, which is weird. It's like, okay, and then it's just all punches, it's all big man offense. The one thing I liked is that Jesse keeps saying not to go after Hacksaw's head. That's the hardest part of that idiot's body. And Bad News
You're not going to scramble those brains; they're already scrambled.
Yeah. So other than that, Danny, I just not much. Kind of like a match that I forget about. Like I forget about this match being on the card.
No, maybe these guys at another time on another show could have put on something different, but this was a cool down match.
Hey, Gino, can I mention something about the Rude match real quick?
Please do.
Afterwards, they play the Warriors' music.
Oh, yeah, because he kind of gets the upper hand on
Bobby or whatever.
That's what happens.
But it seems so bonkers to play the guy who just lost his title's music. I know they do that sometimes, after a DQ or whatever, but
not a straight loss.
Yeah, I just found that really weird. And
so,
Rude has such great music too. I mean,
I'm glad you mentioned that too, because now what ended up happening after that was Bobby, all throughout the night, they had been talking about how busy Bobby was going to be. That was kind of the running theme on this show, is that he was going to be, out of the ring a lot, and he was actually going to have to wrestle in a match against the Red Rooster. So in this match at the end, he gets slammed, Warrior beats him up, so Bobby is obviously going to be selling that injury when we see him in just a minute, which is next. We get the Red Rooster with a quick promo, and we get the Rooster versus Bobby, and the Brooklyn Brawler is following Bobby to the ring, so he's like in Bobby's corner. I love that Bobby is wearing the Andre singlet, the one strap. That's always what I remember about him. And, say what you want about Bobby. This match literally went 30 seconds, 31 seconds. Bobby should have
shown more offense if he didn't get the tar beat out of him by the Ultimate Warrior 5 minutes before.
Exactly. It made
Bobby
sense.
Was ready for this.
It made sense. And I think for whatever reason, if the show was running long, they wanted to be quick, or even if this was just a plan all along, just like, okay, hey, let's get Bobby. He gets beat up after. We can get this match in and out. You get the Rooster to get a squash. But this just does very little. It's just to get the one up on Bobby. But Bobby could care less. He had his big moment right before this. He is the manager of the IC champ, Ravishing Rick Rude. So the Rooster gets the quick win, and then afterwards the Brooklyn Brawler ends up beating him up. I don't know if this is true. I don't know if either one of you guys have ever heard this story either, but I used to watch those, and they have them on the WWE Network. They're some of my favorite things, the Legends of Wrestling roundtables, where they would get like Foley and Jim Ross and like Michael Hayes and Jerry Lawler, or four old school guys, and they would have one topic and they'd all talk about it. It'd either be like a show or like a one wrestler.
Canadians.
Yeah, factions or something like that, right? And it was a ton of fun. And Mick Foley tells a story, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I just always stuck with me. He said when Terry Taylor came in, he came in with Mr. Perfect. And on the same day, they decided who Mr. Perfect, they basically like had Mr. Perfect and the Red Rooster. And they almost gave Mr. Perfect to Terry Taylor. Could you imagine like the difference between getting those two gimmicks? And who knows if he would have been the Mr. Perfect, because Kurt Hennig's awesome. But it's crazy because I always laugh when they talk about how like they have like the bag o' gimmicks. But it was like, you get Mr. Perfect, you get the Red Rooster.
I don't buy that story for a second. Kurt Hennig, he was a AWA champion before coming in, and just obviously money. And Terry Taylor certainly deserved better than the Red Rooster, but those two weren't interchangeable by any stretch.
He wasn't in Mr. Perfect's league at any way, shape, or form. I think, to me, he was kind of just like generic guy. So, I don't know. I think they did well with the right Mr. Perfect. Jason, what do you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, we all hindsight's 2020, but he, I want to know. I would love to know like who thought of the Red Rooster, like what. The gimmicks there, kind of starting with him. I mean, honestly, like, because most of the gimmicks were at least, like, okay, Nikolai's a Russian guy. Like, they were kind of like vague and but like once they started getting really specific, like the Goon and like they just got so silly after a while.
Repo Man, who we
talked a little bit about. And he kind of did the best he could with that. But I mean, the Red Rooster is just the stupid. Like, okay, this guy walks around and caws, like that's nuts. That's absolutely insane. And then like who was the dentist guy?
Kane. It was
it
was Kane. Dr. Isaac Yankem, DDS.
Yeah.
We had Duke the Dumpster.
There's no way that man could. Yeah, like that's not even believable. Like, of course he's not a dentist.
There was a Rikishi.
He's a congressman now, isn't he?
Kane is, yeah, for sure. At one point, they had Rikishi in like 1995 as his gimmick was he was called Making a Difference Spot 2. And he was just like supposed to be this guy who would like go into the community and help the kids and stuff. And like it was just making a difference spot 2. It was like you're coming up with these just bizarre.
Now hear me out, kid. You're gonna go do charity work in the community.
And he would like come to the ring and kind of like rap a little bit and clap to the crowd. You know, it was just oh my gosh, I would just laugh at some of these new gimmicks that they would roll out. We had Pierre Lafitte as the Pirate. He was one of the Quebecers who got turned into the Pirate. Jean-Pierre Lafitte also actually had a good match with Brett. But yeah, this is definitely kind of the start of the gimmicks here as we get set for the main event. And yeah, this was a match that was built up for a year and a half. We get a lot of the backstory. We get a lot of the build throughout the show. And I mean, the match is awesome. A couple things before we get started. This is Macho Man versus Hulk Hogan. And remember, Macho Man won the title a year back. So in this era of wrestling, for Hulk Hogan to have not been the champion for a damn year is crazy.
But he was part of everything.
No, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And he's in the Mega Powers, everything. And that's kind of what was good about this feud. It was like so natural. You could tell that Hogan, even when he didn't want to, or even when you think he didn't want to, he's always kind of stealing Macho's spotlight. He'd always be there. It was never like they didn't wear Macho's clothes. They wore Hogan's clothes, right? You know, when they would dress up together or when they would tag team together. So this, I love this feud. I love everything about it. And I honestly think this match doesn't get talked about as well as it should. This is a damn good match. Macho Man is going absolutely ballistic. He's going crazy all throughout the match speed-wise. And Hogan goes and goes and goes. And Hogan is still going at it with a quick pace, like deep into this match. A couple things I heard which are interesting. So, Macho gets introduced first, which is weird because it's normally the champ getting introduced last. And Jesse makes a point of talking about that. But if you'll notice, when Elizabeth gets introduced, Pat Patterson walks her down, and he's basically got his arms like draped around her. Macho Man was really freaked out about the crowd touching Elizabeth or anyone security guards behind Elizabeth touching her.
Well, if you watch number 4, she gets like groped every time she comes down in one of the new dresses. And so that crowd was terrible with that stuff.
The way the entrance was set up. Yeah.
Yeah, it was only 5 feet wide. And there's stairs, so you got to watch. You can't the Ultimate Warrior can't do his run down the steps, so fall and break his neck.
No, so you, and the thing with Pat, what they always joke is like the thing with Pat Patterson is Pat Patterson's gay, and so they would say Pat Patterson's definitely not going to be worried about grabbing Elizabeth, so he was the perfect person to have walking her to the ring. So right away, Macho points at Liz. He's not happy, and that's when Jesse asks why the champ gets announced first. As Hulk Hogan then comes out, and Jesse calls him Lust Hogan. There's lust in your eyes, Hulk Hogan. And Jesse is just going at Hulk early about going after his best friend's girl. And it was weird. I don't know if for you, Danny and Jason, maybe it was it was weird for me as a kid seeing Hulk Hogan involved with a girl. Because he didn't seem like he seemed like a superhero, not somebody to be in a relationship. I don't know about you, but when I saw him get involved with the girl and any of this, I loved it. It was great, but it just kind of seemed weird to me because it's like Hulk Hogan dates or he likes girls. He what? It just
in retrospect, he may have been better off if he didn't.
Yeah. I was gonna say Gino clearly not a Bubba the Love Sponge fan,
right? Yeah,
but.
Set myself up for that one for sure. Yeah.
You know what though? I know what you mean. I think as an 8-year-old kid, you don't care so much about the couples and love and all that kind of stuff. And so maybe it's just as a kid, you just all you care about is Hulk Hogan beating up the bad guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or even maybe he saves a damsel in distress or something, but it's he doesn't kiss her or it's just that, I don't know. It's funny to see that this guy kind of getting layers now. Someone who was just this unbeatable, hero Superman, and now he's got these layers with his best friend and the best friend's girlfriend and stuff. So that's why this really did a great job storytelling. Like when you look back at it, it was awesome. And Macho's playing a lot of cat and mouse early. He's kind of calling to the crowd. He's getting the crowd pissed off, and Hulk's using his power early on. And Macho is just flying. I mean, he is bouncing around. He looks tan, and he's distracted by Elizabeth. He ends up using her at one point to kind of gain the advantage over Hulk, and then he slows things down a little bit. The crowd's really getting into it. Hogan pulls the tights, and then Jesse gets pissed. He gets all over him using some underhanded tactics. And then, I mean, we don't see a whole lot of blood in this era either. Hulk gets busted open. This is still 10, 12 minutes into the match, and they're moving. The pace is good. It's not like a real slowed down type Hogan versus one of the big man matches, because Macho is keeping this thing quick. He is flying. And he gets tossed out of the ring, and then Liz goes to help him. She stands in front of him, and Hogan goes to slam Macho outside the ring, but when she steps in, he counters, and then Macho does the move. He goes off the top rope with Hogan draped across the barricade, the same move that screwed up the throat of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, the larynx of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat a few years back. And Macho's got the advantage for a while. Hogan's down. Macho goes up to the top. He hits an amazing, beautiful flying elbow. Jesse thinks this is going to be it, but no. Hulk kicks out, and he does the patented Hulk up, the comeback, the boot, the big leg. Jesse is so mad. He says, "This makes me sick." The crowd goes crazy. I mean, it's not as big as Andre Hulk. It's not as big, really, even as Andre or as Hulk Warrior in that the way they put that match together. This is a damn good match. This is like one of Hulk Hogan's better matches that you'll find. And I mean, Macho Man does a lot of it. I really like this one on the rewatch, Jason.
I agree. What's interesting is WrestleMania 4 and 5. I didn't remember a lot about the final matches, the DiBiase, Macho, and this one. And so, like, Hulk Andre, I know every beat of it, and I know everything about, just about it. And of course, the slam because you've seen it 1,000 times. But I remember as I was coming to this match, I was like, I don't remember anything about this. And like with WrestleMania 4, like the early tournament matches, I know everything about them.
Yep.
And we talked about it. It's because we had the disc 1 of the VHS and not disc 2. But it was interesting watching back because, like I said, I just didn't have even Macho's shorts. Like I was like, oh, he wore orange shorts. I just didn't remember that.
Orange shorts. I mean, it got worse from there with him for the costumes the next year, though. But
I always liked him with shorts better than pants.
Yeah, no, definitely. I kind of thought of it as Elizabeth just getting in the way left and right during the match, and just when I was doing the rewatch on this, it's Savage that kind of like gets her taken out to the back, and I was thinking like, is that kind of a face move from Savage? Like he wants to get her out of harm's way, but Hogan's he just wants the title.
Yeah,
she's way too damsel in distress in this match. Like it's almost when Macho attacks Hogan on that. I don't remember what event it was, but I think it was just a regular week kind of Saturday night main event or whatever.
Yeah,
he attacks him in the hospital or
event.
something. And it's like Liz is she's beside herself, and I don't know. It just seems a little too damsel in distress. She never says anything, and so you just don't know much about her. And then when they do interviews, she's so meek and quiet, and so yeah. To me, she was a little. I know she's part of the necessary part of the story, and overall, I think she's a really neat part of his history. But like, I don't know. Yeah, I wasn't so interested for her in this one.
Yeah, she's part of the story, and not always adding like a positive to it. We forget 'cause she was just the first girl. We didn't see girl a whole lot, and no one really like her in this time period. But when you look back at her, a lot of things too. Yeah, she doesn't really have much personality ever. We don't really never know a whole hell of a lot about her. But I think, Jason, what's funny, like everything you said about not remembering a couple of the matches on this show, I felt the same way. And I know I watched this show at least I would rent it back and I'd watch it a few different times, but I guess in comparison, it just wasn't as much as some of the other ones. And I didn't remember a whole lot about this main event match, but damn, you get Hulk Hogan, in a pretty good match, and he goes just under 18 minutes. Like, another guy who gets talked about as not the greatest worker, but I mean, you look at Hulk, you look at Warrior in this time period for like a 3 or 4 year stretch, they were pretty damn good every time they needed to be.
Yeah.
This is the kind of match, kind of blood feud. This feels like it could have been in a steel cage, or maybe the kind of Attitude Era brawl 10 years later could have done something even more special with this. Like,
yeah, because
great match as it was, but it was such a personal level feud. It could have gone on longer, had a bigger blow off, and it just felt like a premature singles end to it.
100%, because Macho, unfortunately, he falls off pretty bad after this match for a while. Like, he's not like in the main event, and there's just not like, that's when they end up having to go to, they go to Zeus, and then they kind of bring in Slaughter, and the Undertaker is kind of another one, and that's when Flair comes in, and then Savage gets reinstated. But Savage it struggles for like a little while after this, and I think he would have been much better. They didn't do it a whole lot, but this could have been maybe a match, and I hate even saying it, but if there was like a DQ where, Hogan wins, Savage keeps the belt, and then they have a SummerSlam, like you said, a cage match blow off, that probably would have been better in the long run. I just don't I hate the idea of your WrestleMania main event ending in that kind of a DQ. Yeah. So I don't even like saying it or like thinking it out loud, but just maybe for these two guys continuing on, because I love these two. They had great chemistry, but I don't think we were ever going to get the pinfall that we wanted for Savage over Hulk, because it just never happened, even all those years later. So, again, I think what we said at the beginning of the show, there's plenty of good on this show. A lot of fun, but there's just also a lot of bad, and a lot of things that didn't feel like they needed to be on a WrestleMania show. So kind of big picture thoughts after we've gone through everything. Jason, what are some of the things you remember or stand out, or overall thoughts here?
Yeah, just I think the length of the show is certainly one. I mean, those bad spots. No offense, Danny, the Morton Downey and those kind of stuff. Like, to me, they always kind of taint the show a little bit. And to me, the Rude Warrior one is probably the most memorable one for me. I mean, obviously Macho and Hogan is, but I mean, a down Mania for me overall.
Danny,
when I suggested this show last time, I did it thinking the Mega Powers explode. I did it thinking Ultimate Warrior, but there was a lot I'd forgotten about this show, and the first thing I'd forgotten was just how long from start to finish this really was, and
it felt that long when you watch it. It did, yeah.
It absolutely did. But the Hogan, Savage, the Warrior, Rude, and then once again my contrary view, the Piper's Pit segment. Those are the things I've always remembered fondly on this. Watching this back. The Mr. Perfect Blue Blazer, that was a good bright spot, but nothing else that really felt must rewatch again.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, kind of, I think mixed signals here. Like down the middle for me too. Also, just some things that I like, some things that I actually was looking at on paper thinking it wouldn't have been as good, and they actually impressed me a little bit more. And then 3 or 4 things that just did not need to be on this show. So that is WrestleMania 5. We have now gone through WrestleManias 3 through 10. We also hit on WrestleManias 13 and 14. Basically try to skip the ones that I really don't like. We didn't hit 1 or 2 because they're sort of hard on the rewatch sometimes, and then 11 and 12 aren't definitely the greatest. But Jason, I'll put, if you don't have one in the back of your head that you love right now, if you do in the next minute or so, let me know.
I'll be honest, this we've kind of, my gamut is 3 to 10.
Early. So
and I really couldn't tell you anything that happened post Austin Brett just because I know about that one, but like all through the 20s, other than going to WrestleMania 19, I really checked out.
So you think about it for the next few days. If there's something that jumps up to you, let me know. We'll link up again in a few weeks. We can figure something out. If not, hey, we'll
should do like the first Monday Night Raw.
Yeah. Any I mean, honestly, we could
Raw,
like I said,
something like that would be kind of fun.
Yeah, we could do a Raw, like any shows at all. I don't mind. The Raws would be shorter, and they'd be a lot of fun. We can watch a lot of this stuff back on the network. So do a little do a little like YouTube dive or something, Jason, in the next few days. See if something jumps out to you that you love. Shoot me a message, and then we'll link up with Danny K again in a few weeks, and we'll have some fun talking some old wrestling and getting back into our childhood, because I always love talking some old wrestling with my buddies. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, Danny. Happy birthday again, Mr. Beam, and give the folks your plugs one more time. Where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, just Google Jason Beam. I'm all around.
Danny K.
Yeah, if you don't know where to find me by now, you probably don't care. So check out my good friend Emily Shields' website, simhorseracing.com.
Look at that. That's cool.
Proud Beamy sponsor.
Great plug. I like that. Cool. Awesome stuff, guys. Well, you have a great rest of your evening, and we'll discuss what we're going to do again moving forward. And I mean, one positive right now, we're all horse racing guys. It looks like hopefully a lot of these racetracks are getting ready and getting open back up. Jason, do you have know what your schedule is as far as any tracks you'll be calling at or anything coming up?
I do, yes. I will be at Colonial again, and
Awesome.
I will be somewhere else that I can't say for a couple weeks.
Quite yet. Okay, but I'm sure as soon as we can know, we will know.
There you go.
So thank you, Jason. Thank you, Danny. You guys have a great night. We'll talk again soon.
See you, boys.
Thanks, Gino.
Folks, don't go anywhere. We will be right back here on That's What G Said. A big thank you to all the guests on this week's episode of That's What G Said. We had Jason Beem and Danny Kovoloff talking WrestleMania 5. We had Erik back to talk NFL, and we'll get you part 3 of that series in our next episode. And hope you enjoyed. Make sure to rate, review, download, subscribe. Don't forget, head on over to YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, anywhere you get your podcast. Subscribe for us. Share the show around with your friends if you can. That's always a big help for us. And anytime you're on social media, if you have a question, a comment, you want to, post about something we said that you liked, you agreed with, you didn't agree with, love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in again, folks. We'll be back in just a couple days with an episode that'll talk about billions. We'll finish up the NFL recap. We'll review Royal Rumble 1992, and then we'll get into some weekend horse racing. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.